Hi, this is Michael William Denney of ThunderShamanism.com, and today I want to talk to you about the difference between Western astrology and Vedic astrology. So, as a shaman, one of my most powerful tools for not only optimizing my life, but also helping other people is Vedic astrology. Now, Vedic astrology is a very, very in-depth, complicated science. And so, to be good at it, you need to have a focus. That's my belief. You should have a focus because, general understandings of anything kind of gets you general results. And I'm interested in practical results. This is if you don't know anything about me, I'm a very practical person. If I can't make it practically work in my life and give me a practical, visceral experience, I'm not interested in it. So that's why I work with Vedic astrology. Western astrology for me is too general. Now, there are some things I've learned about why Western astrology doesn't work for me. Having said that, I do have to say I know that there are some Western astrologers who have really, really delved deeply into that science. And although I personally haven't experienced it, I'm open to the idea that some of them actually may be very good at it. But generally speaking, all the Western astrology stuff that I looked at is way too general, and it's off most of the time. And here's one reason. The Western astrological chart goes off of what's called the tropical zodiac. The zodiac is the signs as it goes through the heavens, and it's a very in-depth thing. Anyway, and the Vedic uses what's called the sidereal zodiac. Now, 2,000 years ago, the sidereal and the tropical were, boom, aligned. That was 2,000 years ago. Now they are not aligned anymore. So many Vedic astrologers will say that Western astrologers are, making predictions based on the sky 2,000 years ago. So they're going to be way off. But there's some other things too. So for instance, now here's where I want to explain to you why Vedic astrology is so much more accurate. Western astrology goes off of the sun sign. And so, for instance, according to Western astrology, I'm a Virgo because I was born September 17th, 1963. So that makes my sun is in, the Virgo sign. But the sun sign lasts for 30 days. So that means, other people who are born in that same 30-day period are also Virgos. Now, does that mean we're the same? Absolutely not. The Vedic astrological chart goes off of the ascendant. So just to give you an idea of the difference in accuracy, you've got a sun sign which lasts for 30 days. And then you have the moon sign. So let's say you wanted to get more specific, the moon, which is connected to the mind, you say, okay, let's look at the moon sign. Well, the moon sign changes every 2.5 days. Well, that's a heck of a lot better, but it's still 2.5 days. That's a pretty big chunk of time. You get down to the ascendant. The ascendant changes every 2 hours. And now we're getting even more specific. But even then, 2 hours. A lot can happen in 2 hours. A lot of changes can happen. So even if somebody's born, let's say, in the same sign, for instance, in my Vedic astrological chart, I'm a Leo. My ascendant is in Leo. Now, Leo lasts for 2 hours. Now you can chop that up into 4 sections because in each sign there are 4 what are called nakshatras. Nakshatras are star constellations. So there are 4 different star constellations. Now Vedic astrology used to be about these star constellations. So now we're changing it. What is that? Every 2 hours. We're changing it every 30 minutes. We're changing different nakshatras within the sign of Leo. Now, to get even more precise, each one of those star constellations, of which there are 4, each one of those star constellations is chopped up into 4 sections called padas. So there are 4 sections. So now we've got it down to a very short amount of time. I mean, now you're within minutes. And so now you're going to see a lot of differences. Now, if you really get scientific, you can get it down to the exact minute and the exact second. And, again, there are Vedic astrologers who can do that. So this gives you a much clearer picture of me. When people meet me, I don't have the typical Virgo personality. That is part of me because my sun is in Virgo, so I do have a lot of that there. But I'm a Leo. I'm out there. I'm all over the place. I'm not the shrinking violet nerd in a book. I'm a Leo, and so my ascendant is much more accurate. Now there's something else which I found is incredibly powerful, and this revolutionized my personal business and helped me to be much more successful in my career. And that's what's called the projection. In Sanskrit, it's the aruta, which means the reflection. And so here's how that works. So I'm a Leo, my ascendant is a Leo, and my moon is in the first house, which means that my mind and my emotions are directly connected to my body. So I need to experience my emotions with my body. That's why, I'm a surfer. That's why I'm into martial arts. That's why I'm into Qigong. That's why I was an actor. That's why I was a musician. Because my body and my emotions need to work together. So I experience myself as being this very sensitive, moody, emotional, vulnerable person, because that's what the moon does. There are other things about my moon that make me feel that way, which is, again, another issue. But people don't experience me that way. People experience me as my reflection. Now, you can calculate, everybody's different, you can calculate where your reflection is. In my chart, my reflection is in the third house. Now, the third house is Mars in Libra. Mars is the warrior. Libra is a Venus sign. So here you have this contrast of warrior and peacemaker. Libra is the scales of justice, the balance. So now we get a clear picture because my aruta, my reflection, is the warrior of balance, the shamanic warrior. Because as we know, shamanism is all about creating a dynamic balance. So it's very important for me to reflect that. So that means every time I do a video, you see all this? The spiritual stuff here. I wear a sleeveless shirt, I go to the gym, I work out, I got a bald head. I do all that to promote the warrior aspect of me, the bodily, the physical warrior. I need to do that. And that is what is people are going to interact with me much better that way. Whereas in the past, when I would try and present myself as this, this shy, introverted, emotional person, it bugged people. They didn't like that. And my feelings would get hurt and all that. And so what you need to understand is that your aruda, your reflection, is how the universe wants to use you. And you need to honor that. So there are times, when I'm teaching or whenever I'm interacting on a teacher level or out in public, where I don't feel like being the warrior. But you know what? I honor that reflection. And I just show up however I'm feeling, and people respond to the reflection. Because here's the thing. People are going to see your reflection. They're not going to see you. They're going to see your reflection. Now, when you know what your reflection is, then there are ways that you can bolster that reflection so that when you do that, people automatically feel better around you. People want to give you jobs. People want to work with you. They want to hire you. They want to pay you. They want you to be that. The universe wants to support you in that. But if you don't know what your reflection is, then you could be sabotaging yourself. So this is another one of the great things about Vedic astrology. I could go into mantra. Mantra is very important, and Vedic astrology has mastered the science of mantra. And I'll tell you a secret. Very many Vedic astrologers do not know how to truly prescribe mantras, even though they should. And so I'll talk about that in the next video. But this is some of the things that I offer. So just to let you know, I'm looking for, first off, just if you're interested and you want me to look at your chart, you want me to find your aruda, or you want me to, whatever it is that we can do, we can take a look at your astrological chart and click on the link below, and I'll look at your chart, and we can talk on the phone beforehand, and I can find out exactly what you're looking for, and we can help you with that. The second thing, I am still promoting Celestial Qigong, to give you the power. Mantra and Qigong together, when they're aligned right. If you do Qigong and you have the right mantra, your mantra will be expanded thousands of times. This is another thing that you can only get with somebody like me. So I get that, celestial qigong. If I'm also looking for 5 apprentices. These are people whom I'm going to teach all of my knowledge to. Now, it's going to be very rare. There's going to be those few people who have the diligence, the patience, the strength, the maturity, the commitment to learn all of the things that I have to teach. But I'm going to take 5. When I have 5 who I know are committed, I'm going to stop taking apprentices. And then of that 5, I'm going to pick 2. 2 who I'm going to share all of my knowledge to. So get on that if you're interested. I invite you to go ahead and click and subscribe, and we can work together for as long as we both think it's a good idea. So next video I'm going to talk about more aspects of Vedic astrology and mantra. All right, happy Saturday evening, everybody. I don't know, I know this is a holiday, so maybe you guys are out doing stuff, but that's all right, because this will be archived for later, if you want to take a look at it later. So, yesterday, we talked about the thunder wheel, which is the word that I use for what a lot of people call the medicine wheel. And we talked about the placement of the gods. So, let me see if you remember that. We placed, where did I put that? There it is. So you can see superimposed upon that is also the rune wheel. So, this symbol here, the Eyjolfur, is a very powerful symbol for my ancestors. It's an Indo-European symbol. It's called the Ashtanga Yantra in the Vedic tradition. So since it's used by both the Norse, this was found in Iceland, and it's used by the Vedics as well, and it's also used by other people, but at the very least we see this same symbol looks exactly the same in both cultures. That means it's probably separated by tens of thousands of years. That's how old this symbol is. Now, I happen to like this because one of my favorite things, and probably the hub of everything that has drawn together all of my understanding from various traditions, has been the 8-sided thunder wheel. And So here's one that I had made. Actually, here's a better one. Here's one that I had made probably, I want to say 6 or 7 years ago. And that was in the backyard or the front yard, and I used it for rituals at night and all kinds of other fun stuff. But it that thunder wheel, which is what I call it, the thunder wheel, is the 8 directions. And when you count the center, you have the 9 worlds of the world tree. So in the Norse tradition, there are 9 worlds. And these 9 worlds are branches off of the world tree. And I've shared with you the same tradition in the Taoist tradition, which is called the Bagua, and I don't have a picture of it here, but it means the 8 gates. It's, if you're not familiar with what a Bagua is, you can Google it, Bagua. Whenever you go to a Chinese restaurant, lots of times they'll have a funny looking mirror with these 8-sided mirror. That's a Bagua mirror. It's designed to do the same thing that this does. It frightens away evil spirits, among other things. That's why you have it on the outside. And then the Vedics have their own version they have all kinds of chakras, but one is called the Dig chakra, and here's a representation of that. And so this is what we're going to be focusing on today. We're going to be focusing on the how the planets interact with each other. So I have it here somewhere, where the planets are. If you don't know how to read the little symbols of what I just had, then I do actually have it written out here. So this is the placement of the 9 visible planets. Instead of the south node of the moon, we have the Earth on there. We don't use the south node of the moon. If we do, I think it would be in the same place as the north node of the moon, because they're actually, the south node and the north node of the moon are a snake. North node is the head of the snake, and the south node is the tail of the snake. So they're really one being. They're just polar opposites of the same force. It's the force of liberation and attachment. They're just the opposite ends of that same force there. So we're going to be talking about specifically this here, the Dig chakra, and the Kala chakra. Dig chakra means directional wheel. Kala chakra means time wheel. So don't worry about those words. I'm going to explain it to you. So I recommend that if you haven't, go and watch what we did yesterday about the God wheel, what I called the God wheel, where to place the gods. And I talked about the difference between when an entity is placed in a certain direction, are they representing a guardian, or are they representing the essence? And so that's important to understand, because that's the same kind of idea that we're talking about here in terms of the planets. So when we place the planets in certain directions, it does first off, the basic connection of the planets, except for, I don't want to get myself into too much trouble here, except for the sun here. No, including the sun. What am I saying? They're representing the essence of these directions. Yeah, I am getting myself into trouble, because I'm going to say actually something different about Mercury. But what we want to know is, when you're looking at a chart, and this is one of the things I do when I do readings. If you're interested in one of my readings, go here, astrology.thunderwizard.com. And this is one of the things I do when I do readings, is I want to see what planets are strong in your chart, what planets are helping you. And then I want to see, what planets are causing you problems. And of course, this is all happening as you look at the chart, you see all this. And so there's two main ways to deal with planetary problems in somebody's chart, which is you either take a planet that is weak, like for instance, for me, the moon, even though I have the moon in my first house, and even though the moon is in Leo, normally that's a very powerful placement for the moon, except for the fact that I was born on a new moon, and on top of that, I was born while changing signs, which is called Sankranti dosha. So all of those things make the moon very unhappy. And so what ends up happening to me is if I don't do energy work and meditation and that sort of thing, I start to leak energy and I start to feel like I'm being stretched. And so things that connect me to the moon. That's one of the reasons I love surfing, because the ocean, there's so much energy and there's a lot of lunar type of healing energy in the ocean, and that fills me up. And doing qigong and doing energy work, doing meditation and doing mantra, that fills me up with the power of the moon. But in any case, I digress. So you want to look and see, if a planet is weak, do you want to just focus on that planet and strengthen it? Or if you have a planet that is really strong and this planet is causing you problems, then you can either appease that planet by worshiping it, or you can find a planet that is balancing it, that will sort of put that bad planet in its place. And for instance, in my chart, this is something that I do. Jupiter, even though I am one of the reasons I'm a thunder wizard is because I have retrograde Jupiter in my 8th house in Pisces. So if you know anything about the 8th house is the house of death and resurrection, sudden events. So it can bring, sudden fame and fortune, but it can also bring you crashing down. And, so I won't get into it, but, Jupiter's been doing a number on me for the past few years. So I've come to the conclusion that, if I start to empower Jupiter, I'm sort of, taking a gamble. If Jupiter, my experience, if Jupiter gives me something really powerful, the other side of that 8th house is going to come in at some point. And so the way that you overcome Jupiter is with Mars, right? So as it turns out, Mars is who I worship a lot for a lot of reasons. But that every time I do that, I help keep Jupiter sort of in its place and keep it from causing me potential, or at least it will lessen some of the intensity of what Jupiter does to me and through me. So we're going to be talking about that. So why don't we go ahead and just get started with that right now. So bear in mind that, again, this eight-sided wheel, also we can superimpose the runes on top of that. So as I was saying yesterday, this 8-sided thunder wheel, the true representation of the medicine wheel in my experience, there are multiple layers to it. You've got the 8 directions, and then you have the 5 elements. I don't think I have the 5 elements here, do I? I don't think I do. I don't have the 5 elements here. I'll look for it and see if I can put it in here. You can put the 8 directions. You can put, then on top of that, you can put the 9 worlds. And on top of that, you can put the 9 planets. Where did they go? And then on top of that, you can put the runes. And then on top of that, you can place the gods. And so you can see how this will work. You use, the shamanism is this. First off, if you're not familiar with my use of the word shamanism, shamanism is a made-up word. There is no such word as shamanism. It's a very popular word, but it's the only word in our modern language that represents, an earth-based mystic. We talk about magicians. We talk about yogis. We talk about, all these things. We're not really talking about what a shaman does. A shaman is somebody who works directly with nature, and does a lot of the same things that mystics and yogis and everybody else does. But a shaman works directly with nature, with the forces of nature, and acts as a conduit. So shamans, in order to be a shaman, you've got to be willing to learn, how to do ritual. And in order to do that, you have to understand the directions. You have to be able to integrate them. You have to understand where the 9 worlds are, and how to integrate this and make this, part of an internalized map. Wherever I go, I always know what direction I'm facing, and what to do with what directions and all that kind of stuff. It's ingrained in me. So, a shaman, again, is a made-up word. Shaman comes from the Siberian, is a Siberian word that means priest. And so they happen to be animists. They happen to be people who worship nature, who believe that everything in the universe has a uh, an essence, a personality, a consciousness, and that you can communicate with everything, which is why there's such a heavy focus on going into trance states and communicating with, totems and animal spirits and ancestors. And you can also communicate with the stars and with the directions and with the elements and all that kind of stuff. So this is the reason why I use that word, because it's the only word that we have in modern language that represents that. Otherwise, I'd have to run around saying I'm an animist priest or an animist spiritual practitioner. Nobody would know what the hell I was talking about. So, astrology, when you take Vedic astrology especially and you bring it into this understanding of what I would call shamanism, it lends another very, very powerful tool and teaches us about the elements, teaches us about the quality of the energy in each of the 8 directions. And it, more than that, it teaches us how to balance these energies, because this is part of the Vedic astrological science. So I'm going to get into that here. So let's just start with each planet here. Let me see, I gotta get myself set up so that I have my notes here to look at so that I know what the hell I'm saying. Okay, so let's take a look at what's in the north, the planet that's in the north. So Mercury is in the north, and as I told you yesterday, Mercury is a guardian. I'm sorry, I kind of got confused earlier. Forget what I said earlier about that. Mercury is a guardian because the north is a place of emptiness. It's as energy comes into manifestation, it comes in and it goes in a clockwise fashion. This is one of the things that we see with the 9 worlds here. So as energy comes into manifestation in the north, it's represented by the mist home, the home of the waters, and these waters are toxic. And as you can see with mist, things are sort of spread everywhere. There's not like a big body of water, it's mist. It's diffused everywhere. And it means that energy is coming in and it hasn't manifested into anything specific or solid yet. It's just, so that's why we need a guide. We need a guide to go in there and to differentiate. Now, Mercury represents the intellect. And what does the intellect do? If you remember from yesterday, the intellect picks apart from among. That's what intellegere means. It means to pick apart from among. Intellect is that, literally that which has picked apart from among. So we need to have an ability to specify things and classify things. Up, that's down, that's left, that's right, that's black, that's white, that's hot, that's cold, that's here, that's there. This is what the intellect does. Because otherwise, if you go into the mist world without the intellect, you just become, you become, taken apart, and you can't differentiate anything from anything. This is what the intellect does. And we said that Odin is the guardian of the North because Odin, he represents Mercury not because he's bound by the intellect. As you know, the intellect is very important, but it's very limiting. I mean, its job is to limit. And so people who are stuck in the intellect, who think the intellect is everything, this is people who are agnostic and atheists, guaranteed they're very, very intellect heavy and might even be trapped in their intellect. People go into their intellect to avoid their emotions because, as we're going to find out here, emotions can be overwhelming. In fact, whenever you have a dream that you're drowning, this means that you feel that you are overwhelmed by your emotions, and you feel that your emotions are going to drown you. You won't be able to breathe. You lose yourself in your emotions. And this is one of the drawbacks of the moon. When the moon is not doing well, this is what happens. So let's say if you have the moon in the 6th house or the 8th house, like if moon is in, let's say, Scorpio in the 8th house, then moon has the potential to go very deep, but you can also have depression because the 8th house and the 8th sign is being in the cave. It's very internal. And so very deep and dark and secret. And the moon doesn't want to be in a deep, dark, secret place. The moon wants to be out in the sky with the sun bouncing off it. The moon worships the sun. And that's what the mind worships the soul. And so the mind needs that. And so the mind, which is also the meditative mind. Remember, I talk a lot about the difference between the mind and the intellect. So now we're going to see how this works. So as it turns out, Mercury is in the north, and it shows us here in the Kala chakra and you have to look at this, the directions are different. North is to the left in this one. You'll see the symbol for Mercury, and underneath that, or to the right of that, you'll see the moon. So look on the far left, in the middle, you'll see Mercury, and then the symbol for the moon right there. So this is telling you something. So what it means is that if the emotions or the meditative mind were to go into the mist world in the north, because the meditative mind is expansive, this is why we use it. We meditate so that we can get into an expansive state, so that we can get distance and we can see things holographically. So you lose the disconnection. When you're in your meditative mind, you can understand where people are coming from. You can feel their emotions. You can see things, from a distance. It's expansive, and the emotions are like that. Emotions can be overwhelming, but they're also, they expand as well. And the mist home is, total expansion to the extent that it destroys everything that has any limitation, because it hasn't become solid yet. So we put Mercury here because Mercury will overcome the tendency of the moon when the moon is not functioning in a way that's helpful for us. The moon, we can't differentiate. We can't figure out where we are and what's going on and what's what, especially in the north, in the mist world. And so we need Mercury. Mercury comes in. So when the moon is not doing well, and the moon is putting you in a space where you just can't, make any decisions, and you're just wrapped up in your feelings. This is a good example. You're really wrapped up in your feelings. Let's say, you get really depressed, or let's say you have a depressive personality, and you find yourself depressed all the time. It's hard to think. It's hard to make decisions. You make bad decisions, right? Like I'll go out and buy a surfboard. That's one of, if I'm sad or depressed, I'll go out and buy a surfboard. And I have too many. I don't need any more. do things like, quit your job, or, these are some things that go through my head. Quit your job, or try and go and, get a new apartment or something. You try and change something that you don't need to change because you're overwhelmed with this emotion. And that's when you need the intellect, because in the intellect, you sit down, you go, okay, let's make some notes. Why is it that we're looking to move? Well, A, B, C, D, F, and G. Why do we need to stay? It's cheaper here, it's closer this, and then you look at everything, and the intellect picks things apart and makes value judgments and says, no, we don't need to move. That would be a bad idea. You're just operating from your emotions right now. And so the intellect separates us from our emotions, and that's good in those instances. As I would say, in our society, for the most part, it's not helping us, because it's people use it as a drug to escape their emotions. But now you get the idea. When the moon is not functioning very well, we use Mercury to overcome it, to remedy it. Okay, so let's keep going. So what do we do in the, what's in the northeast? We have Jupiter. And who's the god that we put in the northeast? We put Tyr in the northeast. This is kind of confusing because Tyr is wrongly connected to Mars, because Tyr is seen as a war god. We talked about this yesterday. Tyr and Jupiter are the same word. Diu, pater, sky father. Tiu just means sky. So this is actually the same being. So Tiu's essence really is Jupiterian. It's not Martian. And so this is interesting, what we're talking about right now. This is very interesting. And if you apply this to what we said yesterday, let's take a look and see. So Jupiter, well, first, why is Jupiter placed in the northeast? Jupiter represents ether, the highest ether energy. And so if we're going in a clockwise fashion, in the north we have unmanifest potential that's just barely manifesting enough to come into our three-dimensional world. It goes clockwise into the northeast. And then we have ether, which is the element that has the least amount of, it's seen as the spiritual element. So it's even still removed from physical reality. It's one step closer, but it's still removed. And so this is where we place the highest ether. And so in this we have Jupiter, and this is why Shiva is placed there in the Vedic tradition, because Shiva represents the highest awareness. And Tiu also represents the crown chakra, the highest awareness. The Sky Father is somebody who lives in the North Star. And he is seen as the emperor of heaven. And this is found in multiple traditions, including, I believe, the Siberian, but definitely the Taoist. And the name for the god who lives in the highest heavens is Di. As you know, the actual name for Zeus in Greek is not Zeus, that's the vocative. His name is Di. So the Greek and the Taoist have the exact same name for the exact same Sky Father who lives in the North Star and governs the universe. So this is why we put him there. So, but what do we use Jupiter for? Who does Jupiter keep in balance? For that, we want to take a look at the dig chakra here, the direction wheel. And here Jupiter keeps Rahu in check. And who is Rahu? Rahu is Loki. So where do we place Loki? Loki's in the southwest. Tiu is in the northeast. Loki is in the southwest. As it turns out, this is actually a polar opposite. You have the southwest is the unconscious mind, the underworld, because we have Hela down there as well, the queen of the underworld. This is your unconscious mind. and the northeast represents your highest, your super conscious mind, your highest possible awareness. And so we use our highest awareness to keep our unconscious garbage in its place. You know, this is why you have to understand where things are, and where the worlds are. I made the mistake early on of facing southwest and opening things up and trying to use it to influence the northeast. And I don't remember why I was doing that. I was brand new and trying to put all this stuff together. And holy crap, did that cause problems. All of my unconscious garbage came up, and my now ex-wife and I fought for like a week. And so I learned a hard lesson. It's like, wow, you want to keep all that stuff there. You don't want to let that stuff out. You know, you need to process that stuff and keep it where it is. You know, it's like opening up the latrine. You know, you don't want to open that up and, you know, have that float into the house. You want to keep it locked up, you know, behind the house where it's not going to smell and bother anybody. This is your unconscious mind. So when Rahu is causing problems, when Rahu has too much power and too much control, an easy remedy is to worship Jupiter or a Jupiter deity like Shiva or Tiu or others. Now, Jupiter is also connected to Indra and Thor, but that's slightly different, and we're going to talk about that. So let's go there next. Let's go and see who is in the east. First, we'll see which god is in the east. Okay, and now we want to check and see what planet is placed there, and what planet is used to help whatever planet. And this one is going to be very interesting. This is very unique. Okay, so in the east, you just see those two little circles with a dot. That means the sun. So what will you see the sun there twice, right? That means we use the sun to overcome the sun. And the sun is the only planet that can do this, because the sun represents it represents multiple things, but on the macrocosmic scale, it represents the soul of the universe. On the microcosmic scale, it represents your individual ego, yourself. And so when your individual self, your ego, is out of whack, what do you use? You use the universal ego. So the sun overcomes itself. So if you've got problems in regards to the sun, then one of the things you can do is go more deeply into the sun as the soul. So if you want to get over the ego, you have to go into the soul, and the soul will connect you to infinity and connect you to your true self. So you have the big self, which is the sun, and then you have the little self, which is the ego. Okay, so that's an interesting one. So what's next? Let's go into the southeast. Okay, and there we have Venus. We talked about, why we put Freja there, because Freja is in fact the deity for Venus in the northern tradition. So with her down there, Venus, what do we use what do we use Venus for to overcome which planet? Let's take a look. Remember, we're looking in the southeast, and the direction on the dig chakra is flipped to one side. Okay, my apologies, I got confused there. So, who does Venus overcome? What do we use Venus which planet do we balance with Venus? We balance Mars. Now this is very obvious. Mars is the god of war. So Mars wants to cause conflicts, cause separation, cause destruction. He wants to kill, he wants to destroy, he wants to conquer, he wants to rule, he wants to put everybody in their place. He's very hot and fiery, and he can cause a lot of, he does what he does. We all know what Mars is. So in order to soften Mars, we use Venus. Venus is, as you know, well, Mars is a monk. I don't know if you knew this or not, but left to himself, Mars is a monk. Mars is celibate, and he saves up all of his energy, just like boxers. You see this in boxers. Boxers, won't have sex before a fight because they don't want to lose semen because it gives them. There's some truth to that. Mars likes to be celibate, and he is looking for his next fight, and he's gearing himself up for his next fight. Venus is a planet of friendship. In fact, of all of the planets, if you're looking for a planet that wants to make friends, it's Venus. It's one of the things that Venus does. Venus will smooth things over, wants to make friends, wants to make deals, wants to soothe things, and of course wants to make love and make connections and make relationships. This is really what Venus is. Venus loves the other stuff. Venus loves sex, and Venus loves food, and Venus loves, physical things. But what she really likes is friendship and connection and friends and family and all that. That's really what she's all about. And so she is used to overcome Mars. Okay, so that's pretty clear. I don't think I need to explain that. So let's move on. Let's see which planet is in the south. So there we have Mars. Now, if we're thinking, if we're thinking superficially, then we're thinking, oh, we already saw that Venus overcomes Mars, so Mars must overcome Venus. Wrong. This is why we need to understand how all these 8 directions work. So let's take a look and see who Mars balances. This is an interesting one. Mars balances Jupiter. That doesn't make sense for a lot of reasons, because Jupiter and Mars are very good friends. Jupiter is the priest and Mars is the general, and the priest and the general and the king are best buds. They hang out and they come together and they make all kinds of decisions about, what to do for the best of the kingdom. So Mars and Jupiter are very good friends. But when it comes down to it, Mars is also very religious, because Mars follows rules. He's very disciplined. He follows rules. He follows orders. And so he knows that when he goes out to fight, he is not only fighting for the country and for his own glory. He is fighting for righteous causes. That's why people stand at attention and they do this at the national anthem, and ideally when soldiers come back, we give them parades and we do all that, because they're fighting for righteousness and they're putting their lives on the line for spiritual truth and goodness and all that kind of stuff, like Superman, right? So Mars wants to obey Jupiter. So pretty much that's, besides the king. But the king and the general, if you get them by themselves without the priest, they'll start a lot of wars, because the king, the son, he has a lot of he's got a lot of ego and a lot of fire, and of course Mars has a lot of fire. You put those 2 fiery planets together, so we need Jupiter to come in here and balance them out and say, listen, guys, we need to look at this from a spiritual perspective, and so Jupiter sort of has that middle ground between Venus and Mars, and can go in between those 2. So the priest can calm down the general. So Let's keep going. Let's go to the southwest here. Okay, so the southwest is obvious. We have Rahu. Rahu represents he's an iconoclast. He does not follow the rules. He breaks the rules. He's a thief. He's a liar. He's this is all on the negative side. He's a liar. He's a con man. He's very selfish. He's into all of the things you're not supposed to be into. He's a drug addict and an alcoholic, and he gambles, and he has hookers, and he all that stuff. Rahu does a bunch of other things. Rahu also, when used right, knows when to cut through the political jargon. He knows how to cut through red tape. He knows how to throw away pointless religious dogma or pointless rules, and he knows how to see deep into the truth of things, which is what makes him such a good con man, because he can read people and know exactly what it is they want to hear and all of that. So he's very good at that. So what does he overcome? For that, let's take a look at the Dig chakra. This is an interesting one. Rahu overcomes Mercury. What is Mercury again? Mercury is the intellect. So this is actually a really interesting combination, because the intellect, as we said, when you're overcome with emotion and you can't see straight, the intellect is like a map. It's like when you're lost in the woods, the intellect is the map. And okay, I got to turn left here because there's the rock there, and then there's a mountain over here, and I got to go this way. I can't just go straight that way. I got to go this. And Mercury likes to figure things out. But when you get stuck in your head, you've got to have something that will get you out of that. Your aspirations, which is another thing that Rahu represents. The truth is that the thing about the intellect, people really, they worship the intellect, but the intellect really can't do a whole hell of a lot on its own. Once you have all that knowledge and you've written everything down in books, it's like, well, so what do you do with that? And how do you get that into working order? In order for that, you have to have some motivation. So Rahu comes and brings motivation, because he is your ambition and your obsession. And so he's going to say, it's great, but what do I do with that? Let's figure out how to take that formula and make $1 million out of it. It's sort of like, who is the guy? Tesla. Tesla is the guy who, brilliant, genius, imaginative guy who figured out how to turn direct current, which electricity, if you don't know anything, I know very little about it, but direct current is very inefficient and doesn't work so well. So you have to have alternating current, which means the current has to go in two directions, and that way you can power, instead of one block, you can power a whole city. And so this is kind of what Rahu does. Rahu says, how can we take this? And he has a tremendous imagination, and he has tremendous, ambition. How do we take this and turn it into $1 million? You're using DC to power one city block. How can we use that same amount? Because I don't want to work hard. I just want to take that same amount of electricity and power a whole city. How do I do that? That's where Rahu comes in and breaks because what Rahu breaks boundaries. He's an iconoclast, and the intellect creates boundaries. And so if you're too trapped in your intellect, then you get stuck. Again, like agnostics and atheists, they can't believe in anything beyond what they can see. They get stuck in that. They need something to break through that, so that they can think outside the box. It's the best, the phrase, think outside the box. So when you have the intellect and Mercury is too stuck, then Rahu says, we got to think outside the box here. So That's how they work. All right, so let's keep going. So let's move to the west and see which planet is in the west. And here we have Saturn. So Saturn is also a form of limitation. It's not the same kind of limitation as Mercury, as the intellect. Saturn is judgment. Saturn is karma. Saturn is the lessons that you have to pay, the price that you have to pay for the actions that you've taken, positive or negative. Saturn also is a hard worker. Saturn works really hard, whereas Mercury likes to think a lot. Saturn says, I want to just work for it, you know, and Rahu comes along and says, hey, Saturn, man, why are you working so freaking hard? You could do all of that in 10 minutes instead of 10 hours. And Saturn says, because I like the work. It makes me feel good. I feel valuable when I work towards something. So he's hard work, he's discipline, he's time, you know, so that's why, again, Rahu says, I want to do this in a half an hour. And Saturn says, I'd rather spend 12 hours doing this. I like working. Saturn whistles while he works. And so we've got that in the West again. And let's take a look. I already talked about this yesterday in terms of the deities, but let's take a look and see what planet Saturn is used to balance. And look at the bottom of the chart here, because that's where West is here in the Dig Chakra. And here we have Venus. So Saturn is the planet that's used to balance Venus. So Venus likes everything, likes pleasure, likes indulgence. Venus says, do it to make yourself, if it feels good, do it, is what Venus says. Venus says, you deserve it. You know, give yourself what you deserve. It's okay. Use your credit card. Buy that. Go on that luxury trip. Go on that cruise. Buy yourself 20 more surfboards. Go ahead and eat that whole cake if you want. If it makes you happy, just do it. It tastes so good. Just eat that entire chocolate cake. Smoke that whole pack of cigarettes. You know, this is what Venus says. And Saturn says, you can't do that. You're going to die. You know, you smoke 10 packs of cigarettes a day, you're going to die. You can't do that. If you can, if you want to eat cake, go ahead, but limit it. So it's limiting. Saturn wants to come and limit the extravagance and the indulgence of Venus. So that makes pretty good sense, right? Okay, let's move on. Who's in the northwest? And I think now we'll be all the way through. So who does the moon balance? The moon is there to balance somebody. Let's take a look. Who does the moon balance? The moon balances Saturn. So Saturn is limitation. Saturn is judgment. So when you're in a lot of judgment, when you're judging other people, this is why meditation is good. Because what does the moon represent? Moon, as you know, means mind. It also means human. And the moon also represents nurturing, represents everything having to do with the mother, with the nurturing that the mother gives to the children. It represents mother's milk. It represents the nectar of immortality. And so here we have the moon is counteracting the dryness. Saturn represents death, represents dry, brittle things, and the moon represents moisture and nurturing and healing and nutrients. So you get too much Saturn in there and somebody dries up, and you get the moon in there to put the water in there to nourish things. So this is how we use the planets to balance each other. And as you can see, it's not a straight one-to-one thing, you know. And so this is why, again, we have to see how all these 8 directions come together and focus around. And you know, you can use it again like a spy decoder ring. You twist it this way, and this lines up, and you get that, you know. So that's just an introduction to that. I don't know if there's anybody out there. I'm happy to take any questions if you want. Before I do, if you know, this is one of the things that we do in these astrological readings is we'll take a look and see which planets can be used to counterbalance the negative effects of other planets in your chart. As I said, for me, as much as I love Jupiter, Jupiter can be a pretty tricky planet for me to play around with. So the easiest thing for me to do is to worship Mars, because Mars will help keep Jupiter in that 8th house, keep him from, you know, being too erratic. And so again, that's just one idea. All right, so I'll take a quick break here, and then I'll see if there are any questions. Okay, so I'm very surprised there aren't seemingly any questions here. So either you're all very well behaved, or who knows what. So let's see here. What I'm not going to do, guys, I know we're talking about astrology. I'm not going to do your chart here. If you want, if you're serious about me looking at your chart or getting a reading, then go here to astrology.thunderwizard.com. I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing people's charts, but you don't have to limit your questions to astrology. If there's any questions you want to ask me about anything, we can. I'll be happy to take any questions that you have. But interestingly enough, there isn't any questions here. Let's see. Question, Skyclad Faye. Okay, you now know what planet counters which. But how would you use it practically in your daily life? Well, I already explained that. I gave you one instance. Jupiter is in my 8th house, which makes it very unpredictable. It can give me tremendous blessings, and then it turns around and it gives me, you know, very intense spiritual challenges. You know, So I don't want to do a lot of worship to Jupiter without being aware of that. So in order to keep Jupiter from giving me crazy ups and downs, I worship Mars. In your daily life, you've got the planets here. You've got the moon overcomes. What did I say? The moon overcomes. Who does the moon overcome again? Hang on one second here. So the moon overcomes Saturn. So let's say you're judging yourself. Let's say you're really trapped in self-judgment, or you're judging other people. That's probably a better one. Let's say you're judging other people. You're in a relationship with somebody and you're constantly judging them. Then what you do is you need to meditate, because the moon is meditation. And that will give you the ability to then see the other person that you're judging so much. You can see the positive things about them. You can see a positive way around how to connect with them, or how to see things objectively. Because when you're in judgment, you're not seeing things objectively. You're pointing fingers at somebody. And so you need the moon to give you that ability. Jupiter overcomes Rahu. So when you want to go and spend all your money on hookers and gambling and pain pills and just party it up, you go to Jupiter, which is what? Spirituality. Spirituality will always say, listen, you don't need to do that. Let's focus on the spirit. Let's try and get what we need from spirituality. As I said, when your ego's out of whack, you're feeling like you're the king of the world and you don't get enough respect, and that's driving you crazy, then you worship the soul. You go deep into the soul. This is the sun overcoming the sun. You've got Venus overcoming Mars. When you want to go and pick a fight with somebody because they're parked in your spot again, instead of knocking on the door and yelling at them and telling them what a pain in the ass they are, you say, "Hi, how's it going? Hey, I just made some muffins. Would you like one? Okay, great. Yeah, hi, my name's Mike. How long have you been here? Hey, can you do me a big favor? I need to get out. Could you park into your spot so I can get out?" That's Venus. Those are practical things, right? You've got Mars overcoming Jupiter. Jupiter, when that same guy says, "No, fuck you, I'm going to park wherever I want," and Jupiter would normally, the spiritual planet would say, "Well, then go and pray about it." Mars says, "No, man, I'm going to call the police. I got to get this fucker out of my spot." So that's Mars overcoming Jupiter. And then you have Rahu overcoming Mercury. Like I said, when you're overthinking things, Mercury says, "Screw the rules, just do it. Let's just figure out a way to get it done." When Venus wants to, like I said, eat an entire chocolate cake, you need to have discipline, which is Saturn. Saturn comes in and says, "Okay, we need to discipline ourselves." So these are everyday practical ways that you can use it. I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear. So anyway, let's see if there's any other questions here. Didge Village. In all caps, he says. Again, if you want to ask me a question, it's best to just simply write "question" in all caps. There aren't a lot of people here, dumping their opinions, which is good. So that means I can actually look at everything that's written, which I like. This is the way I would like it to be. I just want to be able to look at everybody so that I can address everybody. And when people aren't, just throwing things around and, saying whatever the hell they want to say, it makes it easier for me. In any case, Didge Village, I don't know that that's a question unless you say it's a question. So in all caps, he says, "I practice Chinese geomancy." So I'm not sure I even know what that is. Where you can travel or move a house based on 5 elements and get certain energy. Any such practice? Well, what do you mean? In Vedic? In where? What do you mean by any such practice? Of course there are such practices. What's coming to mind for me, and I don't know if this is the same thing, is Vastu Shastra, which is the Vedic version of, what the hell is that called? Are you placing things in the house? There's a Chinese practice for it. It's a little bit different, but yeah, this is where, where you're putting things in the area of the house, and what goes where. And it has to do, again, with the 5 elements and with the 8 directions and the planets and all that kind of stuff. So, for instance, you want to put your, if possible, you want to put your altar in the northeast, and you want to put things like like a fountain in the northeast of the property. And I lived, before I lived here, I lived in a little back house, and this little back house happened to be situated on the northeast part of the property, and you could feel it. You could feel that that was a very healing place, and I got a lot of work done, and I could think from my higher awareness really well. So, Vastu Shastra. Okay. I don't know why you're mentioning 4 elements. I don't use the 4 elements. So Dig Village, if you're new to my stuff, I recommend watch my videos, because I use the Taoist 5 elements, and those are actually the same 5 elements that are used in Vedic as well as, and it's in the Norse if you look hard enough. I don't use the modern Western 4 elements thing. That's that's junk spirituality, junk science. Okay, so again, Dig Village really likes to type in all caps. I did see your question. Yeah, I'm not watching the thing when I'm talking. So when I'm done talking, I go and I look at the questions. So you have to wait. Mitch Robinson, question. So basically everything has a positive and negative energy for you to utilize, and you uplift or destroy yourself based on balance. Well, that would be one way to put it. It's again, if we're talking about feng shui, yeah, that's the thing. Feng shui. There's the Vedic version of feng shui is called Vastu Shastra. Let's see if I think I can. I think it looks like this. Man, spell check. Man, I didn't tell you to do that. I did not tell you to do that. I think this is how you spell it. Stop that. Okay. Vastu Shastra's Vedic Feng Shui. Yeah, I mean, again, shamanism is about balance. So this is why I prefer to represent myself as a shaman, because I don't teach enlightenment in the I was going to say the traditional sense, but it's only this whole idea of enlightenment, of reaching a state of fixed enlightenment, is very new in human history. We only started seeing this beginning with Buddhism, and to me that understanding is actually a misunderstanding. Buddhists, true Buddhism really isn't about the afterlife. It's not. In fact, there's there are so many scriptures, Buddhist scriptures, in Tibet as well as in other places, that are ascribed to the Buddha that he never wrote, and he never talked about the afterlife. He never talked about the soul. He didn't say it existed or it didn't exist. That wasn't his focus. And there's one scripture, I forget what it's called, but there was one scripture where a student comes to him and says, Tathagata, I have been with you for X amount of months, and that whole time that I've been with you, you've never talked about the nature of the soul. You've never talked about life after death. You've never talked about, is there a heaven or a hell? You've never talked, and he lists all these things that most spiritual teachers talk about. And then the Buddha responds and he says, he goes through all that list that he mentions, and he says, when did I ever say I was ever going to teach you that? The only thing that I've ever said I was going to teach you was that attachment causes misery. And if you want to be free of misery, you have to live in the middle. You have to live in balance. It's a mindset. It has nothing to do with anything else. So the whole idea of enlightenment as we think of it, where we reach this state of nirvana, which really is just a state of mind. It has nothing to do with where you go. And it doesn't mean that you've accomplished anything eternal. It's just a state of mind. This whole idea of enlightenment is not part of ancient spirituality. Ancient spirituality is about balance, always. That's why you see these kinds of things everywhere. That's why we work with the 8 directions, and the weather changes. So it's not like you just say something and then everything is just no problems forever. There's always going to be something coming up that you have to balance or deal with or alter with, or and so that's what shamanism is all about. And all of these ancient spiritual sciences are all about this kind of balance. So yeah, there's always something that we need to balance with, and interact with all the time. Okay. All right. So Ditch Village, again, if you want me to answer, you need to put question. As I said, I don't know anything about what you do. And if I haven't answered it, it means I don't have, in my system, I obviously don't have anything, because I don't even know what you're talking about. So I don't have it. So I can't answer your question. I don't even know what the hell you're talking about. And anyway, I'm here to answer questions and not get into discussions about stuff I don't know. So if you have a question for me about what I teach and you want me to help enlighten you about something I'm teaching, you can ask me. So again, and I've said before, it's not helpful to ask me about other traditions or other teachers or other things. It's a waste of everybody's time. So I appreciate the question, but I don't have any knowledge to share with you on that regard. Pharaoh Horace, question, what's your concept on twin flames? What do you mean, what's my concept on? I don't have a fixed concept on twin flames. I didn't believe in such things. Before I continue, I was about to launch into it. I'd rather know why you're asking me. You're asking me for a reason. So obviously you have some connection to twin flames and you have some emotional, it's really important people understand where their emotions are coming from. So this goes back to what I've been talking about. One of the things I want to do is help you to teach you how to ask questions. You'll notice that when people come at me and they're asking questions, and a lot of times I'll ask questions like, why are you asking that? It's because I can feel there's something underneath that. Or they'll ask me a question when what they really want to do is they want me to agree with them. They want to make a statement and they want me to agree with that statement. So they're really not asking. They don't have a desire to know anything. They just want to know if I agree with them on something. And that's not really a question either. The reason why this is important is because, as I said yesterday, when you know how to ask a question, you'll know how to interact with the universe. And the first thing you need to know is emotionally, what is your emotional payoff for that? So if you're asking me about twin flames because you have one, or you don't have one, or you have somebody you're connected to and you want to know, are they a twin flame or are they a codependent relationship that you can't break away from? See, that helps me, because then I can help you get what you want. When you give me that open-ended statement about twin flames, I start to, as I was about to, I start to pontificate on my opinion on twin flames, and I'm not really helping you. And it doesn't help either of us. It distracts from us. We are emotional beings. And one of the things that we Westerners need to do more than anything else is be able to live in our emotions, to feel them, experience them, and then take appropriate action. That's the hardest thing to do. And again, I talk about, Westerners like to get stuck in their intellect because that helps them avoid their emotions, because it's too frightening for them. Or people are like children and they act out on their emotions. They take drugs or get into fights or get into victim mentality states. Those are all acting out on your emotions in another way. Just being in the middle, having your feelings, and positive, pleasant or unpleasant, and then being able to use the mind, not the intellect, but the spiritual mind to see things objectively and then take appropriate action. So that's the reason why I'm such a stickler about questions. So let's see. Skyclad Faye, question. Our native populace, I'm assuming where you live. It's also important when you write out your question, make sure that you write an actual sentence and put all the stuff in there so I know, I don't have to guess. I'm assuming you mean your native population where you live has witch doctors. Basically the same as a shaman. Well, they're the shamans of that particular culture. This is tribe's cradle of life. I don't know what that means. Even though they have the same deities, see next line. Second part, I have now got the opportunity to study with them. I am still on the fence about it. Do you think I should? I don't know. I don't have nearly enough information to know anything about them or what they teach. If I did, I would tell you if I thought it was a good practice or not a good practice. If the universe gives you an opportunity, and this is, I have a big thing about practices that have an unbroken connection into prehistory. So if this is their native shamanic path, it probably has an unbroken connection. Having said that, just because something is a native spiritual practice doesn't necessarily mean that it's positive or negative. It does, there's a lot of, folk magicians and folk magic out there that's pretty destructive. So use a lot of black magic and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know anything about, I think you live somewhere in, I think South Africa or something. I don't know enough about it to tell you whether or not I think it's good or not. Follow your instinct. And if you feel like it's what you're being taught is destructive or could potentially be destructive to you, then don't do it. If you don't feel that the vibration of the teacher is positive, then that's another thing to listen to. So too many things. I mean, I don't know. Follow your instinct. That's the best advice I can give you on that. Well, obviously they don't have the same deities as you have. Skyclad say third part. Even though they don't have the same deities. Well, I don't care about that. I don't know why that's a big deal. I trained with African Yoruba, a Yoruba shaman, an Ifa priest, and they have completely different deities. And I interacted with those deities, and I felt welcomed by those deities. I've trained in all kinds of different things and worked with different deities of different cultures. In some instances, like in the Indo-European tradition, there's definitely a connection between Odin and Shiva. They both share the same name of Ug and Ugra. So, you can find that, Shango is the god of thunder and lightning in the Yoruba tradition, and he has a hammer. Sounds a lot like sounds a lot like Thor, right? And it's clearly a completely different culture. So, I'm not going to go ahead and say they're the exact same deities, but so what? If you're called to work with certain deities, work with them. A true shamanic practitioner isn't going to tell you, that's a Christian. A Christian is going to say, don't worship their God, worship our God. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. That's a Christian thing. So I don't know why that's a big deal to you. It means nothing to me. It will only help you in the long run. I am kind of the opinion that when you're going to work with one teacher, you work with that one teacher. If you're working in one religion, work with that one religion at least for a while. Don't mix things up, because then you'll make superficial connections without having any understanding. So if you want to train with them and focus and worship their deities and see where it takes you. And then, after you've done that for a while, you'll know whether or not you want to continue, or if that is going to teach you something. Listen, working with my African teachers taught me a lot about how my ancestors used to live, how they used to think. For instance, in drumming, I was trained in a couple of different Yoruba drumming traditions. And to understand how this works is that when you're drumming in traditional Yoruba songs, everybody has their own little part. Sometimes it's a long part, but it's very specific. And all of the parts interweave together. And it's the interweaving of these different parts that then creates like the mathematical equation that opens up the universe, and the orishas, the ancestors, the gods come in. And they literally come into where you are. Some people see them, some people hear them, some people feel them, but you definitely know that there are people in the room. that you can't necessarily see. And they're there because that particular rhythm has opened the gateway to their to their world. So kind of forgot what I was saying about that. What was I talking about? Anyway, I can't remember what I was saying about that, but yep, totally forgot why I was saying that. I had something felt very important, but I forgot what it was. If it comes back to me, I'll tell you. Let's see. Let's see if there's any more questions here. Outback Jacks. Question: what nakshatra has the most willpower? I don't know. Sorry, I don't know. Although I know of nakshatras, I have not studied them to the point where I can bring them to the top of my head like that. So I don't know why you're asking that. Do you know enough about Vedic astrology to know how to make use of a nakshatra to give yourself willpower? I mean, again, why are you asking that question? You think you need willpower. How do you know that? You don't know that. This is why you need to talk to a teacher, because, I'll give you an example. There's a guy who I've trained for a long time who thought that what he needed was to stay up. And he wanted a spiritual practice that would allow him to stay up 24 hours a day so that he could get more work done. And I had a long talk with him about that was the exact opposite thing he needed to do. He needed to sleep more and focus on one thing at a time, not try and do 100 different, because he wasn't getting anything done. He was trying to do so many things. He thought a superpower would be to be able to, live without sleep. So you think you need willpower. I don't know that you need willpower, and I don't even think that I know that you and I have the same definition of willpower. But that question strikes me as, because somebody feels they want willpower when they feel weak or ineffective. And so I would need to talk to you more to find out why you feel that way, and then find out what it is that you really need. I don't think willpower is what you need. But I need to know more. I need to know why you're asking that. What is it you think willpower is going to give you? All right, so I don't see any more questions here. Again, we don't have to talk about astrology. We can talk about anything you want. If no more questions come up, I'll go ahead and end it for today. So I'll take a short break and then come back, and then we'll see if we're going to keep talking or if we're going to call it a night. think I remember what it was that I was trying to say. I got kind of lost because I have such a tremendous respect for that drumming tradition that I was sharing with you. And what I was focusing on is the difference between how we think in the West and how traditional societies, including our own, at one point, how they thought and how they felt. And when I was in Idaho and I was teaching this tradition and I taught drum classes, and there was a big African drumming community. There was different kinds of, African drumming, but there was what I would call a drum circle mentality in a lot of it, which is one of the reasons why I don't go to drum circles, which is where people want to just go and bang on the drum and make a bunch of noise, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there's no real music happening. And even if it's, everybody, it doesn't have the same depth, and it doesn't have the same profundity, and it doesn't have the same effect on me as trained drummers in a traditional spiritual tradition who know how to weave those, those rhythms together and create something really magical and wonderful. And for most Westerners, they don't have the patience for that. Number one, they've never been taught it, but number two, they just don't have the patience for it. And I've never been taught any Western musical anything, so I don't even know how to read like what music, or there's some kind of chart for percussion that percussionists use, and I have no idea. It's just a bunch of dots on a paper. I don't know what the hell it is. And one of the teachers I worked with is a master drummer. Same thing with him. He was taught in his traditional thing, and people lots of times in class, and we'd be playing a song, or he'd be teaching people a certain song, and they'd say, "Is that in 6/8 or 4/4?" And he says, "I don't know. It sounds like this." And then he would play it. And he would say, to understand this music, you have to listen with your blood. So I was lucky. I never had any Western training, so that's how I had to learn. In any case, that's how I taught. I taught people, how to, from practical. But people would want to have those, they'd want to have those little rhythm sheets where, and then if somebody knew how to do that, they would go, "Oh, I can do that." And they'd create one of those little rhythm sheets for them and hand it to them. Now, the people could play it once they had the sheet in front of them, but it had no power to it. It had no, you can see them and they're playing, and they're like, you can see them like, they're all stuck in their head with it. And, they're hitting the notes, and it's not that it's wrong, it's just there's no life to it at all. And so that's the difference between listening with your blood and just, "Oh, I know how to put that because the little dot says to put that here." And it's like a computer. And this is, again, just one of the many, many, many things my traditional teachers taught me that we don't have. And so that's why I say it's really important, if you're going to, come straight out of like Christianity and then try to go into paganism or go into heathenism, and you think you're just going to be able to tap into the mindset of our pre-Christian ancestors, you're probably not. You're going to be really far away. That's why, in my experience, so many heathens are so fundamentalist and right-winged in their politics, because they basically just take Christianity and they take all the things out of it they don't like don't drink and don't have sex and don't cuss, and then they go over and they just decide to become heathens, and so now they can drink and have sex and cuss, and then they can still bring all of their, their right-wing fundamentalist viewpoints into their spirituality without any understanding, really, of what's going on. Now, that isn't the case for everybody, but see what I mean? And one of the things that I would like to point out is that I believe this. I believe that Western culture, regardless if you were brought up in a religious home or not, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of people who aren't religious, and I've never been religious, but they still think in those very black and white dualist kinds of ways that go on a very deep unconscious level, which are a direct result of 2,000 years of monotheists, Abrahamic religion instituted into our entire culture. And just because somebody is now an atheist or an agnostic and doesn't, it doesn't change the fact they still think like that. And so for me, all those years, I mean, working with those those teachers that came from completely different cultures where they didn't have that, and they can trace their spirituality all the way back to, you know, the beginning of time. There's a completely different vibe, and it changes the way that you think, and it changes the way that you see the world. And this is what I call shamanism. This is the shamanic mindset. The shamanic mindset is not looking for to be to achieve enlightenment, to be saved. You know, the shamanic mindset is trying to find the dynamic balance. It's a dynamic balance. It's always changing. It's not a static balance. It's a dynamic balance. And this is, I think, probably one of the most important things that you can get if you want to, you know, understand how our ancestors live. And in my experience, live a fulfilled, peaceful, harmonious, and happy life. Okay? Anyway, I babbled on and on and on and on, but let's see if there's any questions here that I can answer for you. Skyclad Faye, question, do you have a specific diet that you follow? Not at this point. There was a point early on when I worked with my yogic teacher, and he got me onto a diet. And you know, I'm pretty stocky now. I'm 205 pounds, and I lift weights, so a lot of it is muscle. But I got down to 145 pounds. So I mean, I was just thin as a rail because he had me on this very special diet. I'm not on a special diet now. I'll tell you what I do is I don't drink soda. I don't drink coffee. I eat a lot of protein and vegetables, and you know, some fruits. So I mean, you know, what you would call a healthy diet, I guess. I try and stay away from. I don't do red meat. The only reason is just because my body doesn't digest it very well. I don't think anybody's body really digests it well. And I supplement my diet with a lot of protein, you know, vegan protein. I'm not a vegan, but I use pea protein powder, so I get enough protein in. See what else. I don't know if I answered your question. So I think a pretty sensible diet if somebody were to look on it, but I'm not following it. I just listen to what my body wants and what it doesn't want, and try to avoid. I don't go to Ben and Jerry's and have giant, you know, ice cream sundaes or anything like that. Really, I'm drinking decaffeinated or caffeine-free rooibos tea. Anyway, I don't know why. You might want to tell me why you're asking me that. I'm not a dietitian, so you probably shouldn't ask me. You should talk to a dietitian, and you know what kind of body type you are, and what kind of element your body is, and all that kind of stuff. Everybody's different. Ditch Village, question. Tiersdag, you mean, is that Tuesday or Thursday? That's Scandinavian. I don't know if I'm going to say that's Tuesday. Tiersdag. Tuesday. Oh, you said right there, Tuesday. Tiersdag is Tuesday, which is Dienstag in German. Dienst means service. What did they worship or serve? I don't know. I'm not German. I'm Germanic, just like you are, but I don't know. I have no idea. Skyclad Faye, I studied their traditional singing, so I understand what you're saying. Okay, all right, that's not a question. Yeah, so you guys, comments again. Let's try to avoid the editorial comments. I'm more interested in your questions. Question, do you think the Christianization was a blessing or a curse? So, Ditch Village, you must be new to my channel. So the majority of your questions will be answered, but please go and watch my videos. You know, put some time and effort into watching my videos. Learn how to search within the channel. Don't just search YouTube, but go into my channel and learn and search whatever term you want. So I've got a lot of videos about what I think about Christianity. I'm not going to take the time to talk about it now. Dude without a hat, question, are there specific colors associated with the runes? Not in my mind. For me, the runes are all fire. They've got, of course, different, very varying things, but as a whole, I would say the runes are fire element. The reason I ask is I was stretching and remembered my favorite color as a child. Now I see it everywhere. Was curious about it. So I don't know if there's a rune connection to a specific color. So I don't have an answer to you for you about that. All right. So I think we're all just kind of babbling here. I'm not really motivated to talk a whole hell of a lot about anything. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. You know, this is a good idea. Again, if you're interested on, again, sometimes it's really important getting back to the focus here on how to use the planets in your chart. And so this is important. And a good astrologer, and when it comes to astrology, there's a thing called remedies. So you want to be able to have an astrologer who can give a remedy that will help you based on your chart. And so this dig chakra, this direction wheel that I was telling you about, where the planets are placed and which planet balances other planets, becomes really important. So if you're interested more in that, you can go here to astrology.thunderwizard.com. If you're interested in learning what it is that I teach, if you're just coming onto this channel and you don't know what the heck I teach, go to thunderwizard.com. And if you want to subscribe there, then you can learn shamanism as I teach it, which has to do with the 8 directions, the 9 worlds, ritual, the 3 selves, runes, the rune wheel. I've got a whole science about where to place the runes and how to use them, the 3 sets of the runes and what they do. And I talk about you know, all this stuff, and specifically how to hack into your unconscious mind through shamanic ritual in order to be able to get yourself to the place where you can intend your reality. You're at a place of dynamic balance within yourself that you can then intend your reality, which to me is, you know, what it's really all about. So you can learn to really enjoy your life. So, all right, let's see if there are any questions here. I don't see. Oh, somebody's going to ask me a question that's going to get us all in trouble here. Mitch Robinson. Google a phrase called plastic shamanism. I don't know you, so I don't know enough about why you're asking this question. So Mitch Robinson asks, have you studied Native American shamanism at all? And you know, I would recommend that you take a look at what that phrase means and what it contains. If you talk to a Native American and ask him or her about Native American shamanism, you will probably get a very sharp rebuke. And they will say Native Americans do not practice shamanism. And what you really want to know is, have I trained with a Native American spiritual lineage holder? And I have not. And I don't recommend that anybody try and train into Native American shamanism, because the vast majority, over 99% of what you're going to find about anything Native American, is not coming from the source, because Native Americans don't run around teaching people how to do their stuff. I mean, I am very open about what I teach. And the people that I've trained with are very open about what they teach. There's no such thing as Native American shamanism. And the vast majority of people who claim to be Native American shamans are either deluded, or they're lying, or, you know, they're off base. They're white guys that are trying to be, you know, here's the thing, you know, all of us, no matter where we're from, we have in our DNA a connection to, you know, if you don't want to use the word shamanism, we have a connection to our animist ancestors. And we have that in our blood, and we have a desire. You know, human beings have a desire to practice this. This was taken away from us, you know, 1,000 years ago in where I came from, where my ancestors came from. But, you know, in Rome, it was taken away 2,000 years ago. And it was replaced with a very destructive spirituality, the Abrahamic traditions. So one of the reasons I'm doing this is so that I can give people an actual, shamanic, for lack of a better word, shamanic practice that is comes from a real science. It's not just something I'm making up or arbitrarily throwing at you and say, let's pretend to do this, which is, I think, a lot of stuff does. I'll try and avoid naming things, but a lot of modern Western so-called shamanic stuff is just a made-up bunch of garbage. It's just thrown together crap that has no connection to anything, and in some cases does more damage than good. So to answer your question, I have not practiced Native American shamanism because there is no such thing. I have not trained with any Native Americans in their tradition. I have done things like go to sweat lodges that were conducted by Native Americans in their tradition, but I never trained with anybody, and so I can't speak on it. Can't speak on any of it. So anyway, you're probably asking out of a an honest place, but if that's an interest in yours, my suggestion is, if you cannot find, by the way, there's a lot of people out there pretending to be Native American or claiming to be Native American that aren't. My suggestion is, unless you can find an actual Native American who actually wants to teach a white person, and most don't, then I wouldn't even bother with it. It's gonna, what a lot of white people running around pretending to be Native Americans, wanting to be Native Americans, they're coming from an honest place because they don't have that in their culture. But it's incredibly destructive and hurtful to Native Americans for all kinds of reasons that we can't understand because we haven't lived it. So go to the people who want to teach you. East Indians want to teach you theirs. My African teachers wanted to teach everybody. My Taoist teachers would train anybody. East Indian yogis will train anybody, because they don't have that cultural history with all that weirdness that we have with Native Americans. So go find somebody who wants to train you. Don't waste your time with Native American shamanism. All right. A lot of people saying something. Again, if you want to get my attention, please ask a question, and I will do my best to answer your question. Aurora Rain question about incorporating crystals into the medicine wheel. I didn't cover it because it's not something that I have a personal interest in. I don't have a problem with it. If you really want to start incorporating crystals like gemstones, each one of the planets has its own gemstone. I wear a moonstone because the moon is the planet that guides me to my highest destiny. And so in Vedic astrology, you wear that planet. And you can also, there's a whole science about where to put gemstones on which finger and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know anything about that, so I don't teach it. But, when you know what, and it's very easy to find out the planet that guides you on your destiny, you can wear that around your neck as a pendant. So each one of the 9 planets has a gemstone, and I teach that in the astrology certification course. astrologycertification.thunderwizard.com. So if you want to be, in my experience, accurate with gemstones, then I would find out in Vedic astrology which gemstones are connected to each planet, and then put those in the 8 directions. I think that would be an effective use of that. Chart reading, dude, you are so much more than this. I don't know what you're saying. Again, that's not a question, and I shouldn't have read that. Oh, because I saw question marks, so I thought it was a question. All right. Some kind the band says, question, does someone's Vedic sign have an association to one of the 5 elements? Yes, just like it does in Western. Yeah, so again, when you guys start fighting with each other and people start cussing, YouTube will automatically get rid of it. So please don't do that. Don't talk to each other. Don't fight with each other. I'm going to get to the point at some point, if people are, really disruptive, I'll just hide them from the channel altogether. Didge Village question. All right, so Didge Village, again, I'd really like for us to be focusing on what I teach. I don't teach any Native American practices, and I don't really want to get into a discussion with it because I'm not qualified. So, really, if you want to, I'm glad you're here, but please put some time into effort in learning what it is that I teach so that you can ask questions about what I teach, not about stuff I don't teach. I just got through telling you I don't know anything about Native American shamanism, and now you're asking me about the Sioux practice of piercing, and are they necessary for growth? And again, I don't even know what the question is, so I can't answer that. Skyclad Faye question: I did not ask the right way. Do you think diet plays a role in shamanism? Well, of course it does. What you eat has everything to do. That's why I don't encourage people to take hallucinogens or entheogens or plant teachers or whatever fucking word you want to use, because it fucks with your energy. I don't care what your experience. I don't care if you zone out and see God and come back. Your energy's all screwed up. And you're not going to be able to think straight if your energy's screwed up. The same thing with what you eat. If you smoke cigarettes, if you drink coffee. I don't do a lot of that stuff because, first and foremost, I want to be healthy and I want to be happy. One of the reasons I'm 54 years old and I have 16.5-inch arms and all that kind of stuff is because I don't fuck around with what I don't take nasty chemicals into my body. I get plenty of sleep and I don't stress out and I eat well and I do exercise and I live a balanced life to the best of my ability. So of course, what you eat is going to have a huge effect on your ability to be a shamanic practitioner. So I would say, without getting into specific diet stuff, I would say get rid of any chemicals that get in the way of your ability to think and feel clearly. That includes nicotine and caffeine. I'm not going to say get rid of all sugar. Probably I should, but I enjoy dark chocolate every now and then, so I'm not going to say that. Get rid of all the crap and eat well. Your body has organs in it. Your organs have spirits. Your liver, your kidneys, your lungs, they have spirits in them. And when you're asking your organs to work hard to get a bunch of toxins out of your system, you're making those spirits unhappy. And when those spirits are happy, then you end up having this human body, which is more than a human body. It becomes an antenna, a capacitor for life force energy. And you can, this is a true shaman, has the ability to take energy from the sky and then empower it and give it to the earth and vice versa. And all this, you can't do that if your body's unhealthy. And what you put in your body by eating is, the main way to keep your body healthy or screw it up. So of course, it plays a huge role. What direction in Norse god, this is Dean Nevins here. So what direction in Norse god is associated with the moon? So we've already talked about that. I'm sure that you know that the northwest is the direction for the moon. And we talked about this yesterday. So if you weren't on the Q&A yesterday, we talked about what I called the God wheel. So here it is. So Frey is in the northwest, and so are the elves. The elves are the ascended masters, human beings that have achieved a bodhisattva state. That is their realm, and their planet is the moon, which is the reflective mind that reflects the light of the spirit. Meditation, energy work, qigong, is all strongly associated with the northwest. Okay, a lot of questions coming in here at the end. Grey Wolf, Norse Shaman 369 question. Teach, I did a ritual today and received gifts from nature, neck bone, and rose quartz and coral. What's your views? My views are congratulations. That sounds great. I don't have anything deep to say on that other than that sounds really cool. I like rose quartz. Hi Pocket 7 question. Just bought runes, watched your video first, then a few other people. I think you mean a few other people's videos. You said the three parts, Odin, Vili, and Ve. Others called it something else. I am confused. So, High Pocket, when you want to train with a teacher, train with one teacher. You know, you want to train in martial arts, you don't go, train with a boxer and a fencer and a kickboxer all on the same day as a beginner, because you're going to get confused, and then you're going to end up getting your ass kicked by everybody. So if you want to learn runes from me, I've got all the information here. You can go, I've got all the three stuff on there. I've got books all over the internet about runes. I've got over here at thunderwizard.com, I teach specific rune stuff. So if you want to train from me, train with me. If you train with somebody else, they may not be wrong, but they may have a different take on it, and it's going to confuse you until you know. We might be in complete disagreement with each other. So, you know, this is one of the problems with Western people who want to learn online on YouTube, is that they bounce around whatever is the shiniest object in front of their eyes. And, you know, it's common with newer students who haven't trained with a teacher, because it doesn't help you. So if you want to learn from me, learn from me. If you want to learn from them, learn from them. Otherwise, I agree, you're going to be confused. Dude with a hat, question, is there anything special about the physical planets themselves, like Jupiter's spots, moons, craters, or perhaps rings and such? I'm sure that there is. You know, the one thing that I find really interesting is Jupiter. Jupiter, in the mythology, the Norse mythology, there's I forget the name of the myth, but it talks about how Thor is basically batting, what sounds like meteorites, and he's batting them out into space, you know. And as it so happens, the planet Jupiter, its gravitational field is so intense and so large that it literally knocks, what could potentially be, world-killing meteorites away from the Earth. Jupiter and the gods that are associated with Jupiter, including the god Jupiter himself, is associated with lightning. And as it so happens, Jupiter has the largest by far, the largest magnetic field in our solar system, except for the sun. And in fact, it says that the sun worships Indra, which anyway, so the thunder gods are all connected to Jupiter, and Jupiter is, it has intense lightning storms. I think I can't remember exactly. I can't remember if the lightning on Jupiter is either 100 or 1,000 times stronger than it is here on Earth. Bear in mind that the lightning here on Earth is hotter than the sun. It's so intense. So that gives you how powerful the electricity and the magnetic powers of Jupiter are. And those are already in the mythology. So to answer your question, I'm sure that there is. Not being a scientist, I don't know all the properties of all the planets, so I wouldn't be able to get into all of that. Ditch Village. My question, again, you're not asking me a question. Now you're just kind of, I don't know what you want to do here. Does growth have to be painful? Do you mean spiritual growth? There's a lot going on that's not coming to the surface with your communication. There's a lot in that question. It makes me wonder about your thinking process. Can you think clearly? Does growth have to be painful? That's a huge question. If you're talking about physical pain, because that's a whole different thing. No. So listen, here's where I want you to go. Go onto my channel and look for, I'm typing it out here for you. That's also a book. I want you to go watch all the videos I have about that. And that is a better explanation. Because again, the reason why I ask people, why are you asking that question, is because most of us are not really all that conscious about what it is we really want and what it is we're really saying and what it is we're really asking. Your question has so much just underneath the surface of it that it makes me really want to get in there with a pitch, like a hammer and a chisel, and really start hammering away to get to the truth of what it is you really want to ask. Because that's not it. That's really not what you're wanting to ask. Anyway, please keep coming back. And please watch more of my videos, as I said. High Pocket 7 question: as a beginner, should I start studying runes first, or should I? Well, I don't know. I mean, if you want to study runes, study runes. Are you a beginner with me? If you're a beginner with me, you can start by studying the runes. If you're new to the channel, my suggestion would be to go and study, watch my videos. I've got a bunch of videos, I think 3 or 4 on here that says free shamanism certification. So go onto my channel and look for that, because that is going to tell you that is going to tell you step by step how to best make use of what I teach. The other thing to do is to go here to thunderwizard.com and just subscribe there and follow the instructions there and start from the first. So if you want to know where to start, those are 2 ways that you should. Having said that, there's nothing preventing you from studying. All I'm saying is if you want to study runes with me, study with me. Don't read my books and then read somebody else's books, and then it's just going to confuse you. Wait until you get a grasp of what I'm teaching. And then if you want to go train with somebody else, go train with somebody else. And then you'll be able to make the decision, from, an educated perspective about who you think is right and who works best for you and all that kind of stuff. But when you study with a teacher, you should stick with one teacher at a time. It's the best thing you can do it's for your benefit. Faust for us question: how do the moons of the other planets fit into astrology? I don't know that they do. If they do, I'm not aware of it. And listen, Vedic astrology is a huge, I don't know Western astrology, I'm sure it's huge also, but Vedic astrology is a huge science. And even though I am a master astrologer, I'm a master astrologer of what I've focused on, which is probably this much out of. Okay, so I think that's it. Aurora Rain question. Somebody already asked me about nakshatras. She asks, what nakshatra do you think is most important individually? Oh, I see what you're asking. What nakshatra do you think is most important individually, ascendant or moon? I'm hesitating because I'm not quite sure. If I had to pick one, if I had to only pick one, and this is a hard pick, I would pick ascendant, because the ascendant is what we associate with your sign. And the reason why the ascendant is important is because, again, like the moon, even though it changes very rapidly, it doesn't change nearly as fast as the ascendant does. And, again, the sun stays in the same sign for 30 days. That's why in Vedic we don't use the sun as your sign, and why Western does, which is kind of strange, because the sun, stays for 30 days. And, and they're wrong at more than half of the time anyway, because it's off by 24 degrees and all that kind of stuff. But even assuming they were right, that would mean that everybody who's a sun sign Virgo is going to be the same, and they're just not. The ascendant really, because it changes every 15 minutes, it gives you a very clear, precise view of how you need to interact with your life. That's what the ascendant means. It's how you interact with your karmas as your karmas unfold. That's why it's the first house, because then everything else is, about how the ascendant, how it deals with the ascendant, how the ascendant relates to it. The ascendant is you. It represents the culmination of everything into your physical body. It represents your identity as a whole. So if I had to pick one, I would say the ascendant. But the moon depending on the context, might be more important, like spiritual names. The default for spiritual names is to give people a name based on the syllable for the moon sign and the moon nakshatra. Having said that, my parents named me without realizing it according to my ascendant. And since the ascendant is the physical body, I credit that to my strength and my health. At 54 years old, people, if I don't have this beard on, some people think I'm in my 30s or my 40s, depending on who they are. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that people have been calling me by the syllable of my ascendant, which is my physical body, my whole life. So I think that's one of the reasons why my body is so strong at my age. Okay, so Sky-clad Faye question, almost forgot. When doing the wheel, do you use true north or magnetic north? I don't. I think you asked me that before, and I don't make a distinction between the two. If I've got a compass, I'll just let it point me towards north, and I'll use that. I don't get that. I don't even know that I care the difference between the two. Maybe that's wrong of me, but I don't care. Either one is fine with me. Ms. Reed question, how can I get a notification on when you're doing a live chat? I would like to have listened from the beginning of chat. I'm sorry about that. I tend to just kind of go off from the seat of my pants, and I haven't disciplined myself to do that and to learn how to do that. Having said that, I believe in your your settings. You can set it up so that you can get a notification as soon as I come on. Having said that, it doesn't matter as much because if you don't catch it live, it will be archived and you can watch it. It'll always be on the channel. And then you can put a question. If you put a question in the video comments, I will answer them as long as you ask an intelligent question. I answer questions on that as well. But my apologies for that. One of these days I may get more, what do you call it? I may get more disciplined about that, but we'll see. I can be very selfish and undisciplined at times. All right, so I think we're coming up on 2 hours. I don't see any more questions coming up. There has been some good questions. I appreciate the new people coming on. Again, if you're new to the channel, the best way to interact with me is to put some time and effort to see what it is that I teach. Put some time and effort and watch the videos. The majority of your questions are already going to be answered by those. Doesn't mean I won't answer them. I do prefer that people ask intelligent questions, and intelligent questions to me means not just honest and a sincere question, obviously, but have an idea of where you're coming from on an emotional level. What is it that you really want to ask me? Because that's where I want to help you the most. And I have a pretty good nose for smelling if somebody is not really clear on why they're asking a question, or if their emotional reasons are sort of hidden behind some other thing. And I know that everybody's got their own, we all have our own defense mechanisms that we've learned over the years, but the more that you're able to identify emotionally where you're coming from and to think about your question before you ask it, probably the better response, and more importantly, the more effective response you're going to get from me that will actually help you get what you want. Because, by the way, that's my job. My job isn't just to teach you all of this stuff. My job is to help you get what you want. And that's really the focus of everything that I do, is to help you get what you truly want on a spiritual level. All right, that's it for me, guys. I am going to, who knows what I'm going to do, relax on this holiday weekend here that we're having in the U.S. All right, so I will catch you guys later. Again, if you want an astrology reading, go here, astrology.thunderwizard.com. If you want to know where my books are, go to michaelwilliamdenney.com. I believe you can get all of my DVDs and videos at videos.thunderwizard.com. Let's see, is that over here? No. Videos.thunderwizard.com. Whoops. Videos.thunderwizard.com. videos.thunderwizard.com. I believe that's what it is. Videos.thunderwizard.com. If you want to learn my type of astrology, as I said, certification.thunderwizard.com. By the way, astrology readings are $100 off. If you go on to astrology.thunderwizard.com, you can get $100 off your reading. And I think that's it. Qigong.thunderwizard.com we haven't talked a lot about, but this is really, it's very powerful stuff, and it's, in my experience, the most powerful thing, the most powerful energy practice that I've seen that can be taught by video. You know, you can learn more powerful stuff, but you have to learn it from a teacher. And I've had people who were Qigong masters in their own right, energy, you know, Tai Chi masters and Qigong masters, and they practice the celestial Qigong, and they've said to me that they've never experienced anything like it. Some people have experiences where they communicate with their higher teachers, and I can't guarantee that. I'm just telling you what people have said. And I think that's it. If you want to learn about the rune wheel here, go and look at all my books on rune shamanism, and you'll learn about what the rune wheel does and how you can take the rune wheel and put it into the thunder wheel and put it into the planetary wheel and the god wheel and all that. All of these things, you know, different layers of the same tool. And in my experience, if you learn how to master even a little bit of what this tool, the thunder wheel, has to give you, even if you learn just a little bit about it, you can completely revolutionize your life and change your life on every level. That's been my experience, and that's why I teach it. That's why I've spent so much time studying it and developing it. It's for that reason. So that's it for me, guys. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you soon. And for those in the U.S., have a great holiday weekend. Esoteric spirituality without all of the fluff, without all of the nonsense. This is the thunderwizard.com YouTube channel. Click. Unilike entity, whereby Hello, Thunder Wizards. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about the Norse gods and how to connect them to the planets in astrology. Before we go any further, please make sure to subscribe if you like this video. Hit the bell button so you can be notified whenever I upload a video. And go up here to astrology.thunderwizard.com. This month only, August of 2019, I am slashing my price in half for astrological readings. So if you want to save $200 on a reading, go to astrology.thunderwizard.com. Okay, so astrology and the Norse gods. Now you might be, if you're unfamiliar with me or my channel, you might be asking, how the hell can you make this kind of connection? Well, when you hear me explain the connection of the gods to the planets, it'll make a lot of sense to you. So first we should just talk about what the planets are, right? So from my little scientific understanding of the planets, let's just focus on our solar system. Our solar system, we have the sun. The sun is the center, and then all of the other planets in our solar system are orbiting around the sun. And it is actually quite true that the sun is the mother of all things. It's the mother of all of the planets, and it's the mother of human beings. And that is literally, if you were to take all of the components of my body and break it down into different molecules and elements, they all had their genesis in the sun. The sun created them and shot them out and did whatever the sun did. And as a result, when human beings were formed in whatever belief system you want to adopt, the building blocks for all life and animals, including humans, was found on the earth, and everything in the earth came from the sun. So our ancestors, and as it turns out, many shamanic peoples, and if you go back in time, even people now who worship the sun as male or see the sun as male, if you go back far enough in time, you will find that they saw the sun as a goddess. And my ancestors were no different. The fact the word sun, Sunna, is the name of the goddess, the sun, and she was the mother. We see this in the Vedic tradition, and the Vedic tradition and the Norse tradition are both offshoots of an original Indo-European tradition. So the reason why I go back and forth between the Vedic and the Norse is because I have a deep understanding of both of them, and as it turns out, they're both sister religions coming from an original Indo-European source religion. And we're going to talk about, you'll see as I talk about the names of the planets, you'll see how there is no difference, So, for me, I really believe in being educated. I believe in being educated and being knowledgeable, especially when it comes to spirituality. It's very hard for me to have any kind of compassion for people who don't bother to learn about their own religion. And many people don't. They just follow their religion because that's how they they grew up, or that's, and they don't, I can remember a while back, I've got a lot smarter followers now, but I remember really early on, I remember seeing comments on some of my earlier videos from people saying, well, I appreciate what he's talking about, but what's with the Vedic? That's different. The Vedic is a sister Indo-European religion, and if you understand that, you will understand your Northern European religion even better, and vice versa, by the way. It goes both ways. So we'll start with the sun. Sunna. Sunna is the feminine aspect of the sun. And the feminine and the masculine are both there. We'll talk about the masculine in a moment. But the feminine aspect of the sun is Sunnah. And for those of you who are new, you may not have heard me explain this, but I'll explain it again. The sun is nothing more than a big giant ball of hydrogen gas. And there are other elements and stuff in there too, but it's mainly hydrogen gas. And the hydrogen, and when you get closer to the core of the sun, is being squished by massive amounts of gravity, because the sun is very massive. So at the center of the sun is all of this gravity, and it is so intense that it causes nuclear fusion. It causes the hydrogen molecules to collapse and explode in on themselves. That nuclear explosion of all of that energy is what ends up, it bounces around inside of the sun for a very long time. I don't know, I think it might even be years, I'm not sure. But it bounces around inside of the sun, and then it makes its way out. And the light and the heat that comes out is the rays. So the rays that hit you of light and heat were originally hydrogen atoms that were smashed together, maybe thousands, or I don't know, I honestly don't know. It was a long time ago. And then it makes its way out and it gets to you. And so the masculine aspect of the sun, which we would call Ra, and we see that in a lot of languages, not just Indo-European. Obviously, you're familiar with Ra, the sun god, in the Egyptian religion, and that's a different language to my knowledge. But you have that same root in our word ray, the ray of the sun. It's the same root. Same with the rune for the track of the sun, which is Raito, R-A-I-D-H-O, Raito. And where we get the word ride, it means to ride, you're the track. When you ride a horse, the sun rides in the sky in that same track from east to west. And so that's the masculine. Order, the rule, following the law. That's Raito, right, doing the right thing. That's the masculine. The feminine is Sunnah. Now you take that word Sunnah and you look at it in the Vedic tradition, and you see Shunyata, which is something that is you see more in the Buddhist tradition, which again is an offshoot of the Vedic religion as well. Buddhism is an offshoot of the Vedic religion. And they use that same word Shunyata, and it's the feminine. And it means emptiness. And that is exactly what it is. At the center of the sun is this giant emptiness, gravity, which is compressing things and creating all of that light and that heat. And as it so happens, the surface of the sun is cooler than the rays of the sun that are beyond it. And again, so you see the difference between internal versus external, and the external is the masculine, the expressive. That's where all the heat is. So we start with that. Now the default direction for worship and all over the world, but this was true in the Indo-European tradition and is true even in the language that we speak, and I'll show that to you in a moment. But the default direction for the sun is east. You face east to worship the sun. And so that is the direction of the sun. And if you want to generally honor the sun, you face east. And that is why, people face east all over the world to do their rituals and all of that, because the sun rising in the morning was extremely important, because that was very symbolic of the mother sun coming to give the life to the world. And so that was the default direction. It so happens that is found in our language. The word north means left and under. And so I'm down here in the southern hemisphere, so this doesn't apply here. But in the northern hemisphere, because the curvature of the Earth, guess what's underneath? The north. You're actually going down as you go towards the north. And it is, if you're facing east, the north is to your left. So that tells you that when you were aligning yourself with directions, you would face east, and then you would figure out where the rest of the directions were. Okay, north, left, and under, right? And there are still people today, it's getting less and less, but there are still people today, if you put them in a box and blindfold them and spin them around, if you give them enough time, they can sense where the directions are. So we used to be able to feel the directions. And so east was where you oriented yourself, and that is the direction of the sun. Now, let's talk about the second sun in our universe. The second sun in our universe is Jupiter. Now, Jupiter doesn't quite have enough mass to become a sun. If it did, if it had more mass, it could have collapsed in on itself and become a star. But it doesn't have quite enough. But in terms of gravity and mass, it is second only to the sun. It has a huge magnetic field, that has a huge impact on the whole solar system. And in the Norse mythology, you hear about Thor, who does things. I can't remember the myth. I'll have to find it and read it to you. But basically explains the asteroid belt and how Jupiter protects the Earth from this asteroid belt that's in the middle of our between Jupiter and the outer planets. There's this asteroid field there that if Jupiter with its massive magnetic and gravitational field wasn't doing what it's doing, sort of cleaning things up, we would be getting pelted a lot more by life-destroying asteroids. So the east is also the direction for Jupiter, and there's no coincidence that both Jupiter and the sun have this connection. Jupiter is like it wishes it could become a sun, and so Jupiter represents the king. If the sun is the queen, the mother, and in the Vedic tradition you have Aditya, which is the mother of the gods as well as Aditya. And if you want a father for the planets, it would be Jupiter. Jupiter represents the king of the heavens. So in many Indo-European traditions, in the Greek tradition, in the Roman tradition, the name for Jupiter, in fact, Jupiter itself means sky father. And so if the moon is the sky mother, then Jupiter would be the sky father. That's different from the Norse tradition of who the king is. So Odin is not Jupiter, in case you're going there and you want to say, oh, Odin is the All-Father. He's Jupiter. No, Odin is a latecomer. We'll talk about him when we get to Mercury. And as I think about it, it really makes sense because Mercury really is the ruler of our world. Without Mercury, we would not have technology. And Odin is representative of that shift, and we'll talk about that. So you've got Jupiter in the east as well, and in the Vedic tradition, it says that Jupiter. No, sorry, I got it backwards. It says that the sun sits in the east and worships Indra in order to gain long life and the power to rule. So, Indra is associated with Jupiter. Indra means the king of the full moon. I won't get into that. If you've watched my channel, you know I've etymologically parse that out for you. But Indra means the king of the full moon. And what is the king of the moon? What lords over the moon? The sun. Because without the sun, the moon doesn't shine. The moon, from our perspective, does two big things that we can see and are aware of. One is the tides. The moon affects the tides, which is the ocean. What is the ocean? The ocean is our emotions, our unconscious, our instincts. And people's moods are affected by the moon. Full moon, no moon, it does affect people's emotions. So, and the oceans are affected. They're constantly in motion because of the moon. Our emotions are constantly in motion. Our mind as well. The whole reason that we meditate is to be able to bring our mind some stability. And so people who have calm emotions are able to think better. And so this is why we meditate. We meditate to be able to have that serenity in our emotions so that we can see things objectively and take conscious action. And those of you who work with me, you hear me talk about this a lot. And we'll talk about that when we get to the moon, so I'll save that for later. So what we're doing is we're going to go clockwise here, and we're starting with the east. So the east is where the sun is, right? So on the right side of that, on the right side of this picture is the sun, which is the east. So that's where we're starting. You see up here, you know what? I've got Jupiter up there, and Jupiter, if I were to place Jupiter somewhere, like the essence of Jupiter, it would be in the northeast. But when Jupiter goes to work, you place him in the east. So Jupiter lords over the east, but that's not where he's from. He's from, if we're talking about Thor, he's from Asgard. But he goes into the east to fight off the giants. So the eastern direction is connected to your identity, who you say you are. So it's very self-oriented. In fact, the sun is the self. It's the soul. It is your identity. And so that's why it's the king. Without an identity, you're nothing. So you have to have an identity. So it's a very self-oriented direction. But the downside of the self-oriented direction is that you become narcissistic, you become like a giant, you become unaware of other people, you have no empathy, you can't relate to other beings, and other beings are just there for your resources to consume. This is what a giant is. So we need the power of Thor, and Thor, who lives in the northeast, he goes to work every day in the east. He goes off to create a boundary between narcissism and healthy self-awareness. This is why he protects human beings. That's what, anytime you read a myth about giants, giants represent a lack of boundaries in terms of your identity. Either you are acting like a giant and you're stomping on villages and biting the heads off of people and just doing what you want to do regardless of how it affects other people, or because of your own insecurity and because of your wanting something from other people, you open up your boundaries for predators, giants to come in and take advantage of you. So there are no victims in this world. This is why I have no tolerance for victims. And a lot of people on YouTube and a lot of people seeking spirituality understandably have a lot of trauma, and so they have a lot of victim mentality issues. I know I have in the past. I still have some that I deal with. And but there isn't any victims in this universe. Whatever has happened, you've done it to yourself, either in this life, or you've opened it up on an unconscious level, or you've allowed it to happen as a result of past life ignorance. And we won't get into that. All the victims are screaming right now. Blah, blah. Anyway, I'm not going to deal with that in this video. But the sun is the brave king. When we're talking about the masculine of the sun, we're talking about the brave king. And so in terms of gods, the sun is Balder. So the sun is Sunna, definitely the sun. And the sun is, if you want to look at the masculine side of it, it is Balder. Balder is actually more of a metaphor for the soul, the human soul. Whereas Sunna is actually the sun in the sky that you look at, even though that is your soul as well. Balder is the soul of the human being. And the reason why the whole myth of Balder having to go down under the earth in the underworld, that is a symbol of our infinite soul becoming incarnated in this flesh, having to go underneath the flesh that covers it. So that's the soul. So this is why Balder brings out so much emotion. And that's what the Christmas story is all about. Christmas myth, which, the Jesus myth really had nothing to do with that. It was hijacked and then turned into the myth about the sun, because our ancestors did all that. At the shortest night of the year, they worshipped the soul, the sun, so that it would come back and the days would become longer. So in the East we have Sunna, and I'm not going to place Balder there, and I'll explain that to you as we get down to the south. I'll explain that later. Jupiter we've already placed. Jupiter's in the northeast, so that would be where Thor is. Thor lives in the northeast because he represents righteousness and the righteous warrior who has the highest vibration, and you have to have the highest selflessness to go and fight selfishness, which is what Thor does. So we'll come back to Thor later on. But I mentioned Indra. Indra means the king of the full moon. And Thor's name means the Lord, or the first cause of the moon. So Thunar and Inthura are the same word. They're slightly different pronunciations, but they come from the same language and the same root religion. And this is why Indra and Thor both are the lightning gods in both the Vedic and the Norse, and why Thor and Indra are lightning gods, because, as I said, it's Thor's Jupiter's magnetic field that protects the earth, which would be human beings. Okay, so let's go further down. So, there we go. This is so backwards. So let's go from east down to southeast, and there you have Venus. So Venus right there, even though that's a Latin word, Venus, in the Latin, Venus is pronounced Venus. So the V is pronounced like a W, and the E is pronounced E. And the US sound right there, or the US spelling and sound right there, Venus, that US is just a nominative placeholder. It just tells you that the case of it is nominative. Don't worry about that. Even English used to have multiple cases. We still have it in the genitive of, like Tom's. The S on Tom means it means possessive. It's Tom's fruit juice, right? And on whom, people mispronounce it all the time. To who are you talking? It's actually to whom. That's the accusative case. So our language used to have all these different endings to it. So when you see the US in anything that's in Latin, the US ending, it means it's functioning as a noun, as a nominative case, the subject. And so you can take that US off. And so that means that Venus is pronounced Wain. And who are the Wains? The Vanir. And so who is most associated with the Vanir? Freya. Freya is there in the southeast, and she's actually standing there in the southeast representing humanity, because the southeast is the direction of humans. This is where humans, everything that is human about us, not our soul, which is infinite, not our mind, which is the moon, but the part of us that makes us human, which is not even our intellect, which is Mercury, but the part of us that experiences life, that likes to drink good tasting, beautiful fruit juice, and wear luxurious clothes and sleep in comfortable beds and eat good food and have good sex and hang out with your friends, and that is the human experience. The human experience. We experience humanity with our body and with our emotions, and they are fused together. And this is the southeast. The southeast is also the realm of the subconscious mind, where we intend our reality. We intend our reality based on our desires. We desire to have comfort, friendship, love, prosperity, and that's when we spend time, trying to project our reality. So this is where Venus sits, Freya. Venus, you can just, the way we use the word Venus, you can just switch it out with Freya. Freya, the Wain, one of the goddesses of the Vanir. So let's continue. So moving down, sorry, this is so opposite. Moving down to the bottom here to Mars. Now, Mars in the Norse tradition is associated with Tyr or Tyr. But I have a problem with just slapping Mars on Tyr, because I don't see Tyr as a war god. He is a warrior, by all means. He's definitely a warrior, but I don't see him in the same way that I see a war god. Because a war god, and Mars in particular, Mars is all about action. And Mars is all about, in his negative side, is about, not just killing the enemy and conquering, but slaughtering the enemy, skinning him, and using his skins for his bedspread. I mean, that's the Greek tradition. Mars uses the skins of his enemies as his bedspread, his blanket. So I don't see Tyr that way, because what is Tyr known for? Tyr is known for sacrifice. And Tyr, for me, represents the highest awareness. So if I were to place Tyr somewhere, I'd place him in the northeast, because that is where Jupiter sits, and actually Jupiter is strongly connected with Tyr as well, because the name Jupiter is D, which is Tiu, Tyr, Diu Pitter, Diu Father, Sky Father, the highest awareness. The Sky Father is also associated with the North Star. And the North Star represents the pinnacle of heaven, where the king of the heavens sits. So Tiu used to sit in that place. And when we get to Odin and Mercury, I'll explain to you what happened and why he's no longer the king. But he is now seen as like the general. But even then, he's not fighting wars. The person that's fighting, that's doing most of the fighting, is Thor. When you hear about fighting, Thor. You don't hear about Tiu going off to fight. And that's because Tiu is known for sacrificing his sword hand, his right hand, to the wolf Fenris. And we won't get into that whole myth, but Fenris represents the lowest vibration of human avarice, greed, fear, that wants to consume the whole world. It's not like a giant who's just selfish. We're talking about the part of the human desperation, that the instincts that can never be satisfied, the black hole of need and insecurity and lust and greed that we need some of that to drive us forward, because without it we wouldn't accomplish anything. But it is so enormous that it swallows us up, and it'll swallow up the universe. And Tiw sacrificed his hand so that the other gods could bind Fenris with the magical rope of subtlety, which tells you how to deal with that, how to deal with addictions, how to deal with insecurity, how to deal with lust, how to deal with whatever insatiable drive that just ruins your life. You have to deal with it with subtlety. If you try and fight it, just like with Fenris, they tried to put a rope around him, he broke through all the ropes. They tried to put a chain around him, he broke through the chains. But when they put on this invisible rope of subtlety, and if you read the myth, you know what I'm talking about. That's my word, the rope of subtlety. But you go and read the myth. He can't get out of that. But what's happened is that Tiw's hand is still in his mouth, and so that means Tiw is still fighting him. That means the highest awareness must constantly be locked in battle with the lowest part of us, and it's a constant battle. And the moment that we step away from our highest awareness, that wolf comes in and starts to consume our whole life. And, he'll break free eventually. And so, we have to be aware. And this is, again, where spirituality comes in and meditation and all of that, because otherwise Fenris breaks loose and will destroy. I had somebody contact me again. This happens to me all the time. People will watch one video and then watch one or two videos and they think they know what I'm all about. And so, and they do what I ask people not to do. They contact me personally. And this guy contacted me personally and wanted to become he wanted to meditate and merge with Fenris to help the world. And he had this idea of who Fenris was. And, he had this thing about wolves and all that, and I didn't get a chance to talk with the guy. He was in and out. Most of these people are just loopy and crazy. They're in, they're out. But he was projecting his own thing and his love of wolves onto Fenris, and Fenris is not a cute, lovable like a wolf. If you've ever seen a wolf in person, I have. In the wild, I've seen them, and I've seen them. I knew a guy who had one, and I went and visited him, and it was a very interesting experience. That animal was. My first experience of it was that animal was magical. When I first saw that wolf, that my feeling was that wolf, it was a magical being, and I was actually frightened. When that animal locked eyes with me, there was the human part of me just kind of went into, I couldn't move for a moment. And so it's sort of like when people talk about when you look into the eyes of a cobra, that it kind of has this ability to sort of put you in a trance. So for our ancestors in Northern Europe, the wolf was not this cute shamanic creature. The wolf always represents this mysterious, extremely dangerous part of ourselves. And even when you've got Odin is the only one that, to my knowledge, has wolves. But his wolves, if you look at the translation of their names, it has the same thing, freak. and I can't remember the exact translations, but it represents ravenous, destructive, you know, mindset, and it means that Odin has the ability to control. His awareness is so high that he has the ability to control these instincts within us, and he uses them. But it's not a worship of the wolf. And listen, I've got nothing against wolves. I think wolves are really cool animals. In fact, if I had to pick among all of the animals that I choose to call totem animals, the wolf is one of my totem animals. So I'm not saying this out of any personal prejudice. In fact, I think people who go out and hunt wolves, unless they're doing it to protect their livelihood and their lives. I think anybody who goes out to shoot wolves for pleasure, I think, is asking for some major karmic repercussions. You don't mess with those animals. They have a right to be here, and they do have a power. When I looked in the eyes of that wolf, first it was huge. Wolves are huge. They're not just like German shepherds. They're just big. They're not. This wolf was very big, and its eyes when it looked at me, it wasn't like it was angry or something. I mean, that wolf was actually a little bit scared, like, who is this person? Because it was a wild animal, and it's not like a dog that goes, oh, there's a person. Hey, it's like any new being is going to be they don't think like dogs at all. But this animal was, I mean, when I looked at it and it locked eyes with me, it was like, wow, I felt this shock go through my whole body. It was a really intense experience. So we're talking about Fenris, and we're talking about Tyr, we're talking about the south. So what do I think goes in the south? I like to put, even though Balder is a sun god, I like to put the sun in the south. Not the sun. I like to put Balder in the south. The translation for the word Balder is bold. That's just the Norse pronunciation of our English word bold. Bald, bald-faced lie means, you're bravely lying. Bald, bold. Bald and bold are the same word, slightly different pronunciation. And so it means bold. It means brave. And Balder, if you know the tradition in the myth, is that he was invincible. That it didn't matter what you threw at him, he could just stand there like Superman, and it would just bounce right off of him. In fact, why do you think Superman gets his power from the sun? He can stop bullets and all that kind of stuff. You see, even though the people who, came up with Superman weren't looking at the myths, these things are in our unconscious awareness and our unconscious memory. So Superman is also an aspect of Balder. And, what is when we're talking about Superman? When Superman is not being Superman, what does he do? He is mild-mannered. He's just another person. He wears glasses, and he's very mild-mannered, which means humility. So even though true bravery also encompasses humility, if you're truly brave, you have nothing to prove. So people who walk around and have to prove, how tough they are not brave. One of my martial arts teachers, I mean, I don't know if I think he's still alive. But I've never seen anybody as, if you put this guy in a room with 20 guys with guns and close the door, you would hear all kinds of noise, and one man would walk out, and it would be him. I mean, the guy had all kinds of crazy energy powers, and in terms of martial arts, he was untouchable. Easily one of the handful of most powerful martial artists in the world. He was one of them. So he was very brave that way, but I'm telling you that in terms of his ability to look at his own emotions, his ability to deal with intimacy, his ability to deal with meditation, these things scared the crap out of him. He couldn't do those things. He was so insecure. So we're not talking about that kind of bravery. There's a lot of brave people out there that would go and strap on a gun and go to a dangerous foreign country and die to protect their homeland. So they have bravery in that sense. But a lot of those same guys, you get them in a room and get them talking about feelings, and they can't handle it. They're so afraid of that. But Balder represents that kind of bravery to be your true self and to love. I have one apprentice who I believe, I have a few, but one of them is somebody who I believe has the real gift of seeds, which is to go into shamanic trance. And she came back after having seen Balder and described him to me. And she described him as being, I'm using my words now, but she described him as being very jovial, smiling a lot, laughing a lot, and he had red hair. And you have to look really hard in the mist to find out that Balder has red hair. And so does Thor, by the way. Thor has red hair. He's not blonde. Thor has red hair also. So these are aspects of the sun. You see this with red. The color red. By the way, the Chinese thunder gods, and as you know, Chinese people do not have red hair, right? So when you look at the Chinese thunder gods, guess what? The Chinese thunder gods have red hair. It means that the color red is representative of lightning, but it's also connected to the sun as well. So I would put Balder in the south because the south represents action, represents the soul in action, fearlessly revealing your true essence, taking action on your true essence. I use the word following your soul desire, taking action on your soul desire. So for me, that's who I put in the south would be Balder. I wouldn't put Tio down there. As I said, if there is a war god in the Norse tradition, it's Thor. But Thor is Jupiter and the sun and the moon. Actually, he's all three of those. We'll talk about that. So, if we keep going, gosh, this is so hard. It's so backwards. This way, I can't even point to it. To the southwest, bonk. There's two deities that I would place there. I would place Loki there, for sure. The planet that goes there is the north node of the moon. The north node of the moon in Vedic astrology, which is what I practice, by the way, so please don't send me comments about Western astrology. We're talking about Vedic astrology. Vedic astrology and Western astrology were both came from a root system that was developed over 2,000 years ago in what is now Afghanistan. It was a city-state, and the people that lived there were astronomers and astrologers. And wise men from India and wise men from Greece both went there. They called it Bactria back then. They both went there and they learned from this city-state. And then they went back to their respective homelands. Western astrology is what the Greeks brought back. Vedic astrology is what the East Indians brought back. But the Greeks, for whatever reason, held on to the tropical zodiac. So you need to understand that the tropical zodiac is off. It's wrong. It's just the calculation for it is wrong. It means you're looking off into the sky in the wrong direction, and it calculates things wrong. Now, 2,000 years ago, the tropical zodiac and the sidereal zodiac were completely aligned, and so it didn't matter which one you were using because you were looking at the stars above you. Now, when you look at, if you open up your newspaper, mine is September 17th, it says Virgo. Though if you look at your Western chart, it's going to be off by 24 degrees, which means that your planets may be in completely different signs and houses. If it is in the same sign in the same house, it's going to be off by 24 degrees, which is going to change things. And that's just, people say, oh, Western and Vedic, it's just two of the same thing, and none's better than the other. Well, it's either accurate or it's not. I mean, if astrology is just something we do for fun and it doesn't mean anything, then I'm not interested. This is either a science or it's not. And Western astrology is off by 24 degrees. It goes off by 1 degree every 72 years. And so after 2,000 years, it's off by 24 degrees, which means as time goes on, Western astrology is going to keep going off. So that's one of the reasons I use Vedic. Vedic uses the sidereal zodiac. And the sidereal zodiac, when you look at a sidereal chart, you're looking at the sky directly above you. Okay? So, in the Vedic tradition, the North Node is called Rahu. And Rahu represents all of your desires, your unfulfilled desires. On the positive, he represents all of your ambition, what you came here to experience, what you have strong desires for to experience. Now, ultimately, the game of this is that the soul comes to realize that everything in three-dimensional reality is ultimately unfulfilling, and that the only thing that will fulfill the soul is to go back to the source, to spiritual reality. But while we're here in this video game, in this 3D avatar, in this three-dimensional video game that the soul comes to play in, which we call human life, while that's happening, it needs to have a desire. So these are the things that you want to learn, that you want to experience, that you really, really want these things in life. And if it goes out of balance, then it drives you crazy. This is where we get addictions, and we get compulsions, and we get obsessions. That's when Rahu is off his rocker and he's not balanced. And so we have to balance ourselves with spirituality, which is Jupiter. Jupiter represents religion, spirituality, and Jupiter is the only planet that can keep Rahu in check. So the north node. So the southwest there represents the unconscious mind. It represents the underworld. When the soul is done with this life and it hasn't learned, or I shouldn't say learned because it's really not so much about learning. When the soul hasn't achieved all the things it wants to achieve, it goes into the underworld. And so this is where Rahu will take you. Rahu will take you to the underworld if you don't learn to see past his illusion. Loki is a magician. He's an illusionist. So is Rahu. Rahu represents smoke. And so, in fact, one of Rahu's favorite substances is THC, which is why THC does not bring enlightenment. It brings delusion. It gives you the illusion of spirituality, but ultimately it's just brings you nothing. It takes all of the energy from your aura. In case you didn't know this, the reason why your head feels so light is because it takes all of the chi in your aura and shoves it up your spine into your head, and your head blows up like a balloon. It's all the life force energy. But what ends up happening afterwards is it brings in all kinds of impurities from outside of your aura into your body. It's very hard on the liver. And that's why afterwards you come down and you crash so hard, and you have to sleep, and you're kind of... And people who are dependent upon THC have to, just to get themselves back up to normal. So this is Rahu. It's an illusion. It's the illusion of spirituality, but it's not the real thing. And so those illusions, those grasping for that which is not real will take you to the underworld. Now, the other planet and the other deity that I would place here is Hela. Hela is the queen of the underworld. She represents the ultimate realization, by the way. She is the ultimate realization. And I would
As I'm talking to you, I feel a connection to Ketu as well. So Ketu is the south node. The reason why you don't see the south node anywhere is because technically the south node doesn't want to associate with anything. In the Vedic myth, Rahu is the head of the snake. So he has a head and he thinks and he sees and he eats, even though everything he eats falls out through his severed neck because his head was cut off. But the body of the snake, which has no head, has no ambition, it has no goals, it doesn't see, so it can't be diluted. It is just simply pure instinct. It's the empathic shamans who have a lot of empathic powers have a lot of Ketu in them. Ketu represents death, being released from the physical world, and so Ketu is only interested in the truth, and for him, everything that isn't spirituality is just emptiness. It means nothing, and so Hela is this. And I'm going off my own personal experience with her, which was, on the one hand, it was, when I talk about her, sometimes I get very emotional because she's the ultimate mother. There's no being in the universe that loves you more than Hela. She takes you exactly as you are with no judgment and will sit with you for 10 million years. And without any judgment, she will sit there with you until you're ready to let go of whatever it is that you're deluded by, or your self hatred or your insecurity. Because when you get to the underworld, there is a place that, what the Christians call hell. There is a place of punishment, but it's all self administered. And from your own self hatred, you can create a hell. And you'll live there and you'll punish yourself until you're done punishing yourself. And Hela will stay there. She won't try and talk you out of your feelings. She will stay there with you in whatever form you need her to be until you're ready to let go. And when you let go, then she becomes this beautiful young woman. Hela is half rotting corpse and half young, beautiful maiden. The rotting corpse half of her is, again, your reflection. What you project. She's like a dark mirror. It's the best way to put it. It's a dark mirror that absorbs everything except your projection. So when you project your self-hatred, you'll create a hell where you're being abused and beat up and tortured. She'll reflect that. She's not doing it, but she'll sit there and allow you to experience all of it. And when you're ready to stop beating yourself up, then that reflection will change and you'll see her for what she is. She's a beautiful young maiden, which is, you'll see yourself as beautiful, and then you'll be ready to go on and leave the underworld. So those are the two deities that I placed down there, and the two planets would be Rahu and Ketu, Loki and Hela. Moving up to Saturn in the west. Saturn is the king of the Vanir. And so that's why the Vanir are placed in the west. In the mythology, you hear that the Vanir live in the west. The Vanir are called the elder gods, not because they're any older than the Aesir. The Aesir do not live in time. They live in timeless perfection. The Vanir, on the other hand, live in three-dimensional reality. They are the gods of three-dimensional reality, and so they experience time, they experience wisdom, and so they're the elder gods, they're the wise ones. And because the Aesir aren't wise, they are pure, and they bring out our zeal and our faith. But the Vanir bring out our love, because they have experience, they have wisdom, they have compassion. And so Saturn is the king of that, which is Njord. Njord is the king of the Vanir. And so that's That's the west. Anyway, moving on to the northwest, we have the moon. Let's talk about the moon for a moment. So, from our perspective here on planet Earth, when you look out in the sky, you see these two luminaries that look sort of identical in size. And in terms of how they affect us, those are the two planets that really affect us. The sun obviously affects us tremendously, and then the moon has a strong effect on us. And so these are the two most, the sun and the moon. And these nowadays are representative of the masculine and the feminine, the sun being masculine and the moon being feminine. But in reality, the sun and the moon are both masculine and feminine within themselves. In this day and age, we see the moon as feminine. And what we are experiencing from the moon that is feminine is the rays of the moon. So the opposite of the sun, the rays of the sun are masculine, the rays of the moon are feminine. And the rays of the moon bring healing. The moon connects us. The sun isolates us because the sun is our soul, our identity. Me, not you. What makes me different from you is the sun. What makes us the same is the moon. When you look into the eyes of your lover and you see things, and oh gosh, we have so much in common, that's the moon. Venus does that too, but this is the moon, puts you on this ability to see into the other person and to be seen by the other person. It represents our thoughts and our emotions, but it also represents healing, the healing of the mother. And so, as you know, women are more, generally speaking, seen as being more emotionally connected, more intuitive. This again is the feminine of the moon, which are the rays of the moon, which are nothing more than the reflection of the sun. This is important to know about the feminine because, for the guys out there, what do you call that? The MGTOW boys. I won't call them men because they have issues with their mother, but the MGTOW boys, they will tell you all the things that are wrong with women. And I've known women that are wrong in all those ways that they see women as being wrong. So I know that those women exist. But that is the feminine that does not have the sun. It's like when the moon does not have the full light of the sun hitting it, it goes dark. And there's no healing that comes from it. We experience it as this black hole that pulls energy from us. And for men who have issues with women, that's how they experience women, because they'll only be attracted to women who are like their mother. So if they have issues with their mother, if their mother was not loving, was not nurturing, mine wasn't. She did the best she could, but she had a lot of problems. And in my early adulthood, I had a lot of problems with women, and I attracted a lot of women that just would pull the energy out of me and did all kinds of cruel, horrible things. And I did my part too, but so I understand where the MGTOWs are coming from, but it's just simply because they haven't seen the moon reflecting the sun. But in order to get that from the moon, the sun has to be reflecting itself. It means the soul, the identity, the true spiritual self. So for a woman to give to a man what he truly wants, he has to be that spiritual king. He has to live his integrity. He has to shine forth the power of his righteousness, whatever you want to call it. That is when the moon opens up and reflects it back. The moon wants this direct sunlight on her. And then when she gets the direct sunlight on her, she reflects it back as this healing, nurturing light that brings everybody and everything together. And when you have that, men, when you have that nurturing of the feminine coming to you, there's nothing in the world that can stop you. And you will go and conquer the world. But the feminine has to have that. If the feminine doesn't, if you don't present that strength, not that, that weird asshole kind of strength, but the strength of Balder, which is This is, it's interesting when you go on dating sites. I personally, I wince every time I see it because I want to sort of say, what am I, your joker? I'm here to entertain you, right? Sort of like in what the hell was that movie? Um, Goodfellas. Well, I'm here to entertain you. That's my job. But when you look in the dating websites, when we'll say, make me laugh. If you can make me laugh, and every time that hits me so strange, like, really? That's what you want from a man? But that is Balder. Balder is jovial. He's full of joy. This is the thing, is that the soul, the essence of the soul is joy. And so the highest expression of the masculine is of joy. And, and making somebody laugh isn't just having a funny joke, because that's not where laughter comes from. The laughter that happens on a first date is the connection and the joy that you share and the warmth that you bring. She's going to want to respond, and she's going to laugh because she's responding to your warmth, the warmth of your soul, but your integrity and your humility, opening the door for her, tipping. Here they don't tip in this country, but that I'm in now. But in the United States, if you go on a date, tip. If you complain about the staff and she didn't come and the waiter didn't do this, and you're chintzy with the tip, the woman's gonna go. Balder doesn't do that. Balder says, I ate the food and you worked hard to give it to me, and here's a big tip. Thank you very much. He's generous. He's humble. This is what the moon is looking for, the feminine. Having said that, traditionally speaking, the moon was masculine. So if the external rays of the moon are feminine, the internal essence of the moon, which is mind, is masculine. The masculine part, meditation, is associated with higher vibrational energy. The feminine is associated with the power of procreation, which is the lower chakras. The higher chakras, generally speaking, we're talking about masculine. And so this is the meditation, because the moon is the reflection of the soul. When you reflect on the soul, then you get the masculine energy. So the moon, you can just call him moon if you want, or man, or mani in Norse, but it's the same root word. Man means mind, and it means the moon as well. And so humans, now if you look at this little graph right here, remember I said that Venus in the southeast was the essence of humanity? You go directly opposite that in the northwest and you're going to see the moon. The moon is the mind. It means that the reflective, meditative mind is shining down on the essence of the human. And, if I were to place one of the gods I would place there would be Frey. Frey and Freyja both are essences of the Wanes, essences of Venus. But Frey is placed there because he is the lord of Freyja. Frey and Freyja. Frey comes from the Indo-European root pra. Pra means expansive energy, which is why it's associated with prosperity. And the word prosperity comes that first root pra. Prosperity and progeny. These are all the expansive power of procreation. Procreation again, pra, right there. That same. You can't get rid of him. He's just there. And anything that has to do with expansion and creation and prosperity, that's Frey. He is the god of that. So Freyja, you have Frey and Freyja. Freyja comes from the Indo-European root praja. Ja means the energy of, the Shakti of pra, the energy of pra. This is why Frey and Freyja are seen as brother and sister and husband and wife. So you place him in the northwest, and he, as the lord of praja, he is pra, she is the energy of pra. He is lording down, looking down at her from the moon, and this He's sending his power to so that humanity will meditate. And when you see him, the the period idols that were done, 1,000 years ago in Scandinavia, you see Frey in meditative posture with a fully erect phallus. It means that he doesn't, even though he represents sexuality and sex, he doesn't overindulge in it. In fact, he meditates on it and he controls that. So you see what I mean? You have these two sides where Frey keeps Freyja in balance so that she doesn't overindulge. And at the same time, she encourages him to indulge as well. So they balance each other out. Now let's get to the north. There at the top, you have Mercury. Mercury is Odin. Odin, Woden, he who is filled with the power of shamanic ecstasy, he who burns with the fire of self-awareness. He is filled with, people call it rage, but it's not murderous rage. It looks like rage to us, but it's somebody who's just frenetic with the awareness of the self. He has no boundaries in terms of his identity. His identity is everybody. This is why it is so ironic to me that the Odinists are racist. Because the least racist, none of the gods are racist, but the least racist would be Odin. He identifies with all awareness. He is all awareness. And so what this means is that for the Germanic tribes people, around 2,000 years ago, you saw a shift from worshiping Tiu, the sky father, who sits in the North Star and directs his people. The word Teuton, as I understand it, means the people of Tiu, people of the North Star, people of Tiu. The sky father, Dieus Pita in the Vedic, Diu Piter, sky father in the Roman. D, we call him Zeus, but Zeus is the vocative. His name is actually D in Greek. D in Greek, Tiu in Anglo-Saxon, right? And Tiwaj, Tiu. This represented the king of the universe. But here we have shamanic ecstasy. And what Odin represents is he represents the intellect. Now, the intellect is not the mind. The mind is the moon. The moon reflects the spirit. And we see a shift. Remember I said earlier that Mercury really is the lord of this age because it is the intellect that is responsible for technology and communication. If it wasn't for, it's Mercury that has turned this into, a global. Listen, I'm here in Australia right now, and you're seeing this all over the world instantaneously. Once I load it, you can watch it instantaneously. I talk to people on Skype all over the world. Instantaneous communication. This is the intellect. This is also Rahu as well. It's like the effect of Rahu on Mercury to create this. But Mercury is really responsible for that. So Odin, becoming the king of the gods, represents the shift that was about to come. Because who brought in and ushered in this new technological age? It was Northern Europeans. Ironically, again, Northern Europeans 2,000 years ago were the most primitive people in the known world at that time. The Romans looked at the Germanic tribes the same way we look at uncontacted tribes in New Guinea or in the Amazon. That's exactly how they saw the Germanic people. They looked different. Their skin color was different. They had these bright blue, green eyes, and they had red hair and blonde hair, and they were tall and muscular, and they just were these freaks from another planet. The Romans 2,000 years ago were actually very short, and they had darker skin. They had dark skin, and they had dark eyes, olive skin and dark eyes. And so imagine they show up, and here are these blonde-haired, blue-eyed, you know, they were these strange beings from another world. They lived in a jungle. Germany at that time and all of those areas were Germany itself, especially Germania, was filled with swamp and forest and bears and wild boars and giant bison. You know, it was just this wild place, and you couldn't take armies there because you'd be sloshing through swamps and rivers and forest, and they couldn't do it, and that's why they didn't conquer Germania. But so ironically, it is the people who were the least, the most primitive, the least civilized, because they started worshiping Odin. Odin represents Mercury, represents the intellect. It is because of that, from a shamanic perspective, I believe that kick-started their ability to then come in and adopt, all of the things, mathematics and science and all that stuff. By the way, that was all created in India and in Arabia and in, Greece and Rome. None of that was created in northern Europe. They were very, they were, nowhere near all of that. But because they had been worshiping Odin, who represents the refined intellect, they were able to master that and then take it and then bring it to the next level. And so, of course, it was Europeans that brought communication and everything, all of that, to the world. And because they had, in my belief, because they had walked away from worshiping of Odin, that is why then technology has been used by Northern Europeans in such a destructive way. And so the sad part is, as the Hopis say, the Hopi Indians knew that the white man was coming, and they knew that if he showed up with a cross within a circle, which is what we call Odin's eye. You've seen those. You see that in Scandinavia 1,000 years ago. You'll see, brooches that are a circle with a cross in the middle of it. If they came with that, then they would know that they remembered who they were, and it would create a utopia, because they would bring knowledge of technology, and they would merge it with the earth knowledge of Native Americans, and it would create a utopia. But if they saw the white man coming with a cross without a circle, then you knew that all hell was going to break loose. So they knew this, the Hopi people. And by the way, to my understanding, the Hopi people are one of the only, if not the only, Native American tribe that was not carted off and taken to a reservation in a different area. They still live in the same lands that they've always lived in. And they say it's because they do their secret rituals that keep the world in balance, which they don't share with any outsiders. And so in secret they go and they do these rituals and songs and dances that keep the universe together. So, it doesn't surprise me that they knew, but it's because we walked away from the worship of Odin that this balance of technology and nature is there, and why our greed and our fear and our insecurity has been driving the modern age. But it was inevitable that those who worshipped Odin were going to be the ones who were going to bring technology for better or for ill. Because, to my knowledge, to my awareness, it was only the Germanic tribes that worshipped Odin. I don't know that any other, somebody connected to me and commented and wanted to connect Shukra Karya, the Vedic god of the planet Venus, with Odin because he saw some similarities. But no, you got to look deeper than that. You got to look much deeper than superficial. Venus is Venus and Mercury is Mercury. They're very different. Mercury is the intellect. And so the reason why Odin stands in the north is because the north in the Norse tradition is the realm of the waters of creation, which is the closest that you get to the void. The true void is outside of the 9 worlds. But the closest you get to the void is the northern world of Niflheim, the home of the mist, the home of the waters. And it means, the reason why it's mist is because it's not water and it's not air, it's just sort of like this mist. It means it hasn't congealed into anything. So it represents pure potential. And so if we were to go into that realm bodily, we would be torn apart because we are specific. We have an identity. You know, my body is this, I'm 5'9", blah, blah, blah. And we have a specificity. But in that realm of the unmanifest, you would be torn apart because nothing's manifested yet. So the only being that's able to go there and retain his identity is Odin, because Odin is the only being that died to himself and whose entire being is consumed with shamanic connection. He's done this. He journeys to all of the 9 realms. No other god does that. He journeys to all of the 9 realms. He guards the north. But if you were to place him on his throne in the northeast, where Asgard is, but when he's off doing his work, he's off in the north. He's off in the north, and he is our guide to true potential. You know, I mean, if you really want to think about what you can accomplish and what you can create, Odin is a god to worship, because he will tell you, because he can create and manifest anything, because he can go to the realm of pure potential and survive. And it was in fact the Northern Europeans that brought all of this technology to the world. We wouldn't have it. I mean, nobody, I don't care who it is, the Chinese, Japanese, you know, all the high technological countries, they wouldn't have it if it wasn't for Northern Europe to bring that knowledge. You know, especially we could even say the United States. You know, Russia likes to claim responsibility for everything, but you know, the invention of the car, the invention of the light bulb, the electricity, you know, all that stuff happened in the United States, which was a Germanic, you know, colony of England. So is that, even though not everybody was of Germanic ethnicity, you know, who invented things, you know, George Washington Carver, who, you know, unlocked the potential of peanuts, you know, everything having to do with peanuts. He wasn't of European descent, but it was the essence of Odin that had come over from Northern Europe in that new land. It was Odin working through all these people to elevate the intellect to create all this technology. Okay, so we didn't talk a lot about astrology, but there you go. So again, go to astrology.thunderwizard.com. You can see there's 50% off to get a reading from me. You can even save more money if you get a reading from one of my apprentices. Hit the subscribe button if you like it. Hit the bell button. And that's it for me right now. I'll talk to you guys later. Hello, Thunder Wizards. So, gosh. We're going to be talking a little more in depth about the video, the last live stream I did, which is Sagittarius. The sign of Sagittarius is that a black hole. And we're going to go deeper into that, having to do with understanding spirituality and are black holes what connects us to true spirituality. Before I get into that, I got to give you a little update. I had just spent 20 minutes or something making this video. Anyway, my computer, something is going on with me and technology, because I now am unable to live stream, and that is because somebody else, completely unrelated person, made a complaint to YouTube that I had violated copyright and whatever. And it was a very old video from years and years ago. I completely forgot about it. And I believe that I had used some video footage that I got off the internet. I had no idea that it was copyrighted. It was such a long time ago. I didn't know what I was doing. But anyway, they complained, and I've got a copyright strike, which means that I cannot live stream for another 90 days. I have sent them an email, and I have said to them, please, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what I was doing, but I promise you it will never happen again. I humbly, sincerely apologize. Can you please contact YouTube and tell them that we've resolved it so that they can take the copyright strike? I need to do my live stream in order to make a living. And we'll see. Otherwise, if they don't get that email and or they choose not to heed my request, then I will not be able to live stream once again for another 90 days. So, and then I just came on and I did this whole video and my computer decided not to record it, and anyway. So I'm really trying to deal with some frustration right now. There's not a whole hell of a lot I can do about it, but that's how it is. So anyway, listen, I need your guys' support more than ever because those live streams really help my bottom line a lot. That's where I get a lot of clients. It's where a lot of my income comes from. So please do me a favor, neo.thunderwizard.com. Go up to courses.thunderwizard.com to see all of the things that I have available to you. And since we're going to be talking about astrology, you can go to astrology.thunderwizard.com for a reading. And if nothing else, then if you really want to support the channel, the best way to do that is to go here to thunderwizard.com. That will take you to my Patreon page, and you can subscribe. Even at the lowest level, you will get access to hundreds of hours of in-depth teaching and video that you can't get here. And of course, we got the Manifestation Mastery course, which you can subscribe to there. But that's the best way to show me. I know for a fact that there are a ton of people that come onto my channel all the time and watch me religiously. And, and this free channel is there for you no matter what. But if you really want to show me some love, I ask you to go up to thunderwizard.com and subscribe, and or go to any of the other links and support the channel. So let me get those other links up there. Let's just keep this one up here. So we're going to be talking about the constellation of Sagittarius. We started talking about it last time, my last live stream that I did. And I had found out that Sagittarius is located in the center of our galaxy. Now that sounds really interesting and cool because the center of our galaxy, we would think that would be the center of spirituality, the source, as it were. But as it turns out, at the center of our galaxy is a supermassive black hole. And if you're not familiar with what black holes do, we don't know, honestly, but we know that whatever they contain so much intense gravity that nothing can escape, not even light. So you can't see a black hole. The only way to know a black hole exists is when you look out into space and you see how bodies are responding, if it's a smaller black hole and you're looking at how stars are orbiting, if they're orbiting something you can't see, or a planet is orbiting something you can't see and it's doing something funky, that tells you that there's a black hole there. But in the center of our galaxy is a supermassive black hole, which is, I don't even know how many, I think millions of times more massive than our own sun. Just an intense, huge black hole. If you were to be able to see a black hole, which of course you can't, but if you were able to see, let's see, is that it? No. If you were able to see a black hole, do I even have that here? I don't know if I have that. Doesn't look like what did I do with it? Oh, it's this thing. So if you were to see a black hole, you see up here, this looks like some weird picture of Saturn, like a black Saturn. And you know that like there's a sun behind it, and then there's rings around it. Actually, what that is that is a representation of a black hole, and what looks like rings going around it is a bunch of material like stars and solar systems and gas clouds and all kinds of that heat up, and so they start creating huge, letting out huge amounts of light, and they're orbiting super fast around this black hole. But because the black hole, the gravity is so intense that it bends the light so that what looks like the outside of the planet is actually the ring. As the ring, see if I can get my fingers, as the ring goes around and it hits the the black hole and starts to go around it, you can't see through it. So instead, that material goes up and around and down and back and around like that, and it bends the light. In fact, if you're in that what looks like sorry, this is backwards. What looks like what's going around there, all of that material. If you were in a spaceship and you were orbiting super fast around that black hole, it would bend the light to such a degree that if as you're looking out your viewer, your windshield of your spaceship, you would actually end up seeing the back of your own spaceship. It would bend light around so fast that you would be looking at your own tail. This is how intense these black holes are. So this is what is at the center of our galaxy. And what I find ironic about all of that is that the star constellation that is associated with the center of our galaxy is Sagittarius. Sagittarius is the 9th sign, and its original placement is the 9th house. The 9th house is the house of spirituality, of religion. And here's what I find ironic about that. People are attracted to religion because it comforts them. And they look to find the source. If you're a monotheist, then that is where God is. That would be heaven, is where God is. And God created the world, and God loves you, and God saves you, and God gives you life, and all of that. For those of us that are not monotheists, then this would be the center, the source of all life, the soul from which all of the other souls come from, including all of the gods. And galaxies, if I understand my astronomy and my physics, which I don't, but if I understood what little I've heard correctly, galaxies are factories for suns and solar systems and planets. That it's the rotation and the gravity that brings together gas clouds and dust clouds, which then create their own gravitational field and then pulls it together. If you have a massive enough cloud of hydrogen, for example, as it comes together, the gravity will get so intense it'll pull it in, and then it will start creating nuclear fusion at the center, which is the hydrogen atoms start to collapse in on themselves, and the nuclear fusion explosion that comes from that is the light that comes out of the sun, and it burns. It's a nuclear fusion reactor. That's created from, I believe, from not from solar systems, from galaxies. So that means that the gods themselves, because the sun is a deity and is the deity that's most important when it comes to life on this planet, is the sun. Everything worships the sun on this planet. Without it, there would be no life. And in the Vedic tradition and in the Norse tradition, there's a class of gods which translates to the celestial gods. In the Norse tradition, they're called the Aesir, but they are celestial deities. They are, like the sun. The sun is one of the Aesir. These are actual stars. So they're made from stars. Stars are the result of what happens when galaxies are, the gravity of galaxies, which means that the reason why galaxies are rotating, right? So if we were to look at a galaxy, we would see this, and that's actually not completely accurate because that little black hole in the center would represent the massive black hole, which creates the intense mass and gravity from which all of the stars and all of the gases and all of the dust is orbiting around. And we would be on the outside of that. If you look, right, if you see my finger, you go straight up from there, you see that little, what looks like a little blue dot, that would be pretty much where our solar system is. And it is believed by the Vedics, when they talk about the yugas, it is believed that our sojourn around this black hole creates the yugas, and the closer that we are to the galactic center, which would be this massive black hole, the closer we are to spiritual understanding. So the golden yuga would be when we are closest, and the Kali yuga, which is the age of darkness, which we just came out of in the 1700s, would be when we're the furthest away from this massive black hole. Black holes they consume everything. They consume and destroy entire solar systems and planets and suns and stars, and they gobble everything up. And that's what I find really interesting and ironic about it, is that that's a very frightening image. And the black hole itself, I mean, black holes are these, they're so, all laws of physics break down and we don't know what happens. What would happen if you were to get sucked into a black hole is that the closer you got, time would start to shift. And as you're looking away, like let's say you're falling into it and you're looking away, then you would see all of the stars and the planets rotating super, super fast. For you, time would speed up as you're looking at it. If somebody was watching you fall into the black hole, they would see you get to the event horizon, and they would see you moving more and more slowly the closer you got. And then when you hit the event horizon, you would just stop. And you would be stuck there like a fly on, fly paper, for I don't know how long, but a very long time. I think thousands or millions of years or something like that, a really long time. And then once you got past the event horizon, you would get sucked into, you would then probably see all of the light, the blinding light that was unable to escape. And then you would start to be pulled like into a noodle. You'd be pulled into a string. And the gravity at your feet would be, I don't know how many times, but many, many times stronger than it is at your head. And would be horrific. And then you would get pulled apart into your, and even your atoms would get pulled apart. As you would then get sucked into an infinitesimally small singularity that has unlimited mass, which is, I believe, what Gununga Gap was. The source of all creation. And so I find that a very frightening concept, and yet this is what we worship as God, as the source. And the ninth house is the house in our astrological chart, which literally represents the black hole from which the intense gravity creates everything, including the gods, and we can't help but worship it. It's the temple. But it's ultimate destruction, but we worship it as life and luck. And what I find also ironic about religion, which is the ninth house, is that emptiness, the mystery and the fright, the just absolute frightful understanding of what goes on at the center of our galaxy, creates this need for us to create religion. And the more religious somebody is, the more wonderful and beautiful their God is. So, and the more, to me, it's directly inverse to how much fear you have. Because if you're afraid of death, if you're afraid of destruction, then you create a religion where you have an all-loving, all-powerful God who controls everything and will save you as long as you do the right thing and follow all the rules and believe the right way, then God will forgive you. You know, those of us who aren't monotheists see things a little differently. But even so, as a polytheist and a shaman, then I would have to accept the idea that the celestial gods, you know, name definitely the sun, because the sun is created from, you know, was spit out of, you know, what was going on when our galaxy was, who knows how long ago, was forming and bringing together all of the hydrogen that created our sun. All of the other stars, the god Tyr is the North Star. It's another star, celestial deity. We have the Aesir, we have the Vanir, which are a different class of entities, which are not celestial. They're gods of time and space and experience and wisdom and knowledge and magic and fertility. And yet, but everything, you know, because the planets, we believe, are created from stars. So we could say that the gods created us, because if it weren't for the sun, you know, doing whatever it did, wouldn't have created the earth. I could be wrong about that, but I think I'm somewhere in the right aspect of that. But I just thought that to be a really interesting thing to be thinking about. Anyway, it's too bad that I've been blocked again from. It's just so annoying that you know, you can't talk to somebody. They don't even tell you what you did wrong. It's just, you know. And I understand they got to protect themselves, but still, there's got to be a better way to do this. There's got to be. It's just so annoying. Anyway, I wish that somebody had said, "Hey, can you take that video off?" I would have been happy to take it off. All you had to do was ask, or let me know. Hey, did you know that this is somebody else's and that you're violating? I would have taken it off. No questions asked. Anyway, I've scoured all of my videos, and I think I've deleted all the videos that could possibly have that kind of copyright strike against them. Anyway, so that's it for me. Listen, if you want to support the channel, as I said, and you want to know where your ninth house is and where your Sagittarius is, go to astrology.thunderwizard.com, and we can talk about the two, you know, points of where the black hole is in your chart. Of course, subscribe, hit the bell button, and listen. These live streams were hugely impactful on my income. That's where the majority of all of my sales come from, and you know, it's from the question and answers. That's what gets people to subscribe and to pay for services and all that. So when I can't do that, it means that I'm limited in terms of my financial income. So if you really love me and you love this channel, then of course you can do things like go to astrology.thunderwizard.com and get an astrological reading from either me or one of my apprentices. You can also go to runereadings.thunderwizard.com or runecertification.thunderwizard.com, get a rune reading from me. And you can also, of course, neo.thunderwizard.com is the 4-step process I believe that is most important. I don't care who you are. Go and check that out. I think there's a video there that will tell you what that's all about. And then if you want to see everything that I have available, you could go to courses.thunderwizard.com. All of my books, I have written books. People ask me all kinds of questions, and it's like, so you haven't bothered to buy a $10 book and read one of the books? It's in the books. The books, the DVDs, the streaming video courses, all of the other things that, all of the other services that are there, courses.thunderwizard.com. And then last but not least, go up here to thunderwizard.com. If you really love me and you support this channel, if you're one of those people that watches my channel all the time, but you haven't bought anything, congratulations. You should take advantage. I would take advantage of anything that's brought to you. If you want to see me stay here and do this, and you don't have a hell of a lot of money, go to thunderwizard.com and subscribe at the lowest level. You'll get access to hundreds of hours of video training on shamanism, ritual, energy work, runes, mantra, mudra, all kinds of stuff. And if you want to become part of the Manifestation Mastery course, you can also subscribe there. So I need your support more than ever. I know I sound like a televangelist, but this is how I've chosen to pay the bills. So if you want to support me and see me come on and make more videos, then I ask that you support the channel. Of course, subscribe and hit the bell button. All right, that's it for me. I'll talk to you guys later. Try to avoid getting sucked into a black hole. And I'll talk to you guys soon.
Esoteric spirituality without all of the fluff, without all of the nonsense. This is the thunderwizard.com YouTube channel. Click.